Hi, this is Alt-Shift-X. House of the Dragon is back. It's time for Hot D3. Hot D is a prequel show set 170 years before Game of Thrones, and it's about a vicious civil war among House Targaryen. Season 1 was the gradual setup of all the relationships and the conflicts over years and years. Season 2 was the gradual beginnings of the war. It kept threatening to break out into all-out war, and now here we are. The dragons are flying. The battles are happening. It's Rhaenyra's side, Team Black, versus Aegon's side, Team Green. And you'll be forgiven if you have forgotten some of the names. It's been 2 years since Season 2. And who can possibly keep track of Aegon and Daemon and Aemond and Rhaenyra and Baelor? They're all blonde, they're all angry, they've all got the same name. So let's figure out what's going on. Thank you so much for joining me. We are live streaming right after each episode airs at about 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time Sundays. This stream has no spoilers for future episodes, except we might do a little spoiler zone at the end of this live stream. You will be warned. You should know that my evil brother Alt-Shift-X is also making weekly discussion videos with Glidus. It's called Dragon Time, and it's very silly. And Dragon Time is also out now on Nebula. The link is in the description if you want to sign up to Nebula. It's a good way to support this channel. So, what happened this episode? Season 3, Episode 1. There's a lot going on. We had the Battle of the Gullet. Shariko Lohar's pirates attacked the Velaryon fleet. Rhaena rode the dragon Sheepstealer into battle, and Jace died. Corlys and Tyland were both lost overboard. Hugh and Ulf and Adam, the new dragon riders, had a very strange camping trip where they encountered a green man and a magic goat and Alice the Witch. What on earth was that about? I was not expecting to see a magic goat today, but here we are. Let's try and figure it out. It does connect to some obscure Game of Thrones book lore, so that's exciting. Daemon meets Roddy the Ruin, leading the Winter Wolves from the north. Aemond has a very awkward kiss with his mother Alicent, which is sure something. Rhaenyra gets locked in her room by Jace, misses out on the battle on the Gullet. We get a weird boys' trip with Aegon and Larys Strong, who get captured by the Stauntons. We meet Ormond Hightower and bold John Roxton leading the Hightower army. So, it's all happening. Let's talk about it. What's going on? What does it mean? How is it different to the books? We will discuss it at length. You should know that this season Alt-Shift-X is not making weekly explained videos like we normally do. For 10 years we made explained videos about every episode of every Game of Thrones show, but we're not doing it this season. This season we're only doing these live streams, and there's also Dragon Time with Swift and Glidus. The reason we're changing it is that this season we're doing something new, which is that we're going and seeing the new Game of Thrones play put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company. That's happening in July. And the play is about the Harrenhal tourney and Robert's Rebellion, and it's made with input from George R.R. Martin, the author, and it looks like it might reveal answers to some of the biggest mysteries in the Game of Thrones books. So I'm very excited to see this play, and we will be covering it in just a few weeks. And if you want to see our coverage first, you can check it out on Nebula. Links below. All right, let's talk about this episode. So, the opening sequence is slightly different. So in Season 1, we had like a bloodline sequence with a trickle of blood going through Viserys's model of Valyria as a sort of a metaphorical family tree. Season 2 introduced this like tapestry sequence. So it has the history of the Targaryen dynasty from Valyria and dragon magic, and then the doom of Valyria. And then we had the conquest of Westeros by Aegon Targaryen I. That's King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. And then this is the Dance of the Dragons, the war that's happening now. That's the death of Jaehaerys last season. And this is the Battle of Rook's Rest last season. And this is Rhaenyra claiming her new dragons. So we're seeing how everything that's happening now is continuous with the history of House Targaryen in the past. They are writing history with their decisions now, and what they're doing is going to impact House Targaryen for generations to come. And while in Season 2, this sequence was leading up to the Iron Throne in the background, now all we see is embers and smoke and darkness. So there's a sense that this whole conflict is no longer even about the throne necessarily. It's just wanton destruction. It's just revenge and fury. This is House Targaryen destroying itself. That's what they said in House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 1. A voiceover from Rhaenyra said that the only thing that could destroy House Targaryen was itself. The gods say that the most terrible war is a war of kin against kin, sibling against sibling, and that's what we're starting to see here. This is a terrible war of self-destruction. It's a tragedy. It's a family eating itself. So, our first scene is in the Vale with Rhaena Targaryen. So remember, Rhaena Targaryen is the daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon. Rhaena is the sister of Baela Targaryen, twins in the books. And Rhaena always felt left out, because her dad, Daemon, has the dragon Caraxes, her mother, Laena, had the dragon Vhagar, her sister, Baela, had the dragon Moondancer, and all of them were cooler than her. You know that, like, Family Guy meme, where, like, Meg comes down and she's like, "Why do you guys always act like you're better than me?" Yeah, that's how Rhaena feels, because everyone in her family has a dragon except for her. And so she feels like she can't contribute to this war. She feels like her dad, Daemon, ignores her. And so she's desperate for a dragon. And so in this episode, she finally gets a dragon, but it doesn't quite turn out the way we hoped. Which is exactly like what George Martin loves writing about. George Martin writes about dreams and hopes and ambitions, and how our dreams usually don't turn out the way that we hope. Sometimes our ideals and our hopes clash against harsh reality. Sometimes we are disillusioned, sometimes we are disappointed, and Rhaena's dreams of becoming a dragon rider backfire when Sheepstealer disobeys her at the battle and burns her own people. And so that's what this is leading up to. So last season, Rhaenyra ordered Rhaena to look after Rhaenyra's young children. So there is Joffrey, Rhaenyra's youngest son that she had with Harwin, and then there's also Aegon and Viserys, the little blonde kids that she had with Daemon. Rhaena was in charge of looking after these kids in the Vale. And then Aegon and Viserys were being sent over to Pentos in the east, and Rhaena was meant to go off with them, but instead Rhaena disobeyed, ran off into the Vale, and chased out this dragon, Sheepstealer. So Sheepstealer in the books is described as an ugly mud-brown dragon who is vicious and ill-tempered, and I think they've captured that here in the show. Sheepstealer has a wonderfully ugly face. He's all toothy. He's got, like, the underbite of all underbite. This dragon needs braces. He's very spiky and kind of asymmetrical. He's got all these crazy bedraggled wings. He's got interesting skin going on. He's all wild and mangy, and I think that's consistent with how he's described in the books. Sheepstealer is one of the larger dragons alive, at least in the books. Sheepstealer is like around 80 years old, because it says that Sheepstealer was hatched when King Jaehaerys was young. So I figure, yeah, Sheepstealer's like 80 years old. So Sheepstealer should be like maybe like the 5th biggest dragon alive. Sheepstealer is not as big or dangerous as Vhagar or Vermithor, but Sheepstealer is one of the more powerful dragons. So Rhaena tries to claim Sheepstealer, but we've learned, like we saw last season, that it's not easy to claim a dragon. You can't just hop on board and turn on the ignition and skirt off into the sky. Last season, we saw people try to claim Seasmoke, and people tried to claim Vermithor, and that went very badly. Remember Season 2, Episode 7, Vermithor was like stomping around like Godzilla, just eating people, until Hugh bravely managed to claim him. The TV show last season mentioned that Rhaena previously tried to claim other dragons, including Seasmoke, and Rhaena was almost killed when she tried to claim those dragons. And Sheepstealer in the books is particularly dangerous. In the books, many people tried to claim Sheepstealer, and Sheepstealer killed lots of dragon seeds, killed lots of people. Alan tried to claim Sheepstealer in the books, and Sheepstealer burned Alan. Alan was almost killed by Sheepstealer, and Alan has these burns on his body from Sheepstealer. So Rhaena's being very brave in approaching Sheepstealer. Later, Rhaena tries to sing a song to Sheepstealer to try and calm Sheepstealer, like how Daemon sang a song to Vermithor in season 1, but Sheepstealer doesn't like that song. But it seems like they gradually build up some trust, and Sheepstealer starts to bring sheep for Rhaena to eat, regurgitating sheep for Rhaena, which is, disgusting and also cute. It's like how when a cat brings dead mice for its owner. And eventually Sheepstealer does let Rhaena ride him. So it's a bit like in Book 5, there's a sequence where Daenerys is lost in the Dothraki Sea and trying to get Drogon to obey her, and she eats some of the animals that Drogon hunts. So I think this is a little bit inspired by what's going on there in the books. So yeah, she rides on Sheepstealer, but she ultimately can't control them. The whole bond between dragon and rider is mysterious in the books. It seems as though like it might be partly like a magical, psychic connection, a bit like the connection between a skin changer and their animal. But it's all mysterious. Like, we know that in the TV show, it can take a lot of time to learn to control a dragon. Like, I like that in House of the Dragon Season 1, we saw Jace and the boys getting dragon lessons. They had how to train your dragon lessons in the dragon pit with the help of the dragon keepers, and they gradually learned Valyrian commands, and they developed a bond with their dragon over time. In the books, it's mentioned that the ancient Valyrians controlled dragons with binding spells and sorcerous horns. So there's meant to be like a system for this. There's meant to be a process. There's meant to be tools and dragon keepers and a dragon pit. You're not just meant to hop on and go. You're not meant to just jump on an angry lizard and hope for the best. But that's what Rhaena does, and it doesn't end well. I think this is just part of the general downfall of House Targaryen, which is itself just like the last little remains of the great Valyrian Empire in the past. Like, this was meant to be done differently. The Valyrians used to have their shit together, but now they've got random dragons just running amok through the countryside, and random teenagers just jumping on top of these flying nukes. It's not what's meant to happen, but that's what's happening. It's all going terribly wrong. So this entire plotline with Rhaena and Sheepstealer, it's a big change from the books. In the books, there's a completely different character who claims Sheepstealer. She's called Nettles. And Nettles seems to be a common girl, and it's not even completely clear if Nettles has Targaryen blood. Nettles is all quite mysterious, and Nettles claims Sheepstealer by bringing the dragon sheep to eat every day, gradually winning his trust. And Nettles does fly Sheepstealer at the Battle of the Gullet, but the book doesn't mention Sheepstealer disobeying Nettles. And so this is a really big change to Rhaena's character. And I'm very curious to see what they're doing with Rhaena in the show, because it's going to be different to how it is in the books. The author of the books, George R. R. Martin, complained that he doesn't like some of the changes that the show is making in Season 3. George said that some of these changes will have ripple effects that are going to affect the storyline as it goes on. And it sounds like George is particularly angry about this change to Rhaena and Sheepstealer. So I'm very curious to see where it's all going. So then we catch up with Doctor Who himself. It's Matt Smith playing Daemon Targaryen in the Riverlands. So Daemon had a funny plotline last season where he was tripping and having crazy visions at Harrenhal with the help of Alice Rivers, who was, giving him a bit of psychedelic psychotherapy. And Daemon, originally, like, in Season 1, it seemed like Daemon wanted the throne for himself. He has ambitions of being like make Valyria great again. Let's bring back the old Dragon Lord power. Let's just conquer and be badass again. But Daemon also doesn't really have a lot of patience for politics. And so in Season 2, he was humbled a bit. Like, Daemon did this brutal stuff in Season 2. Like, he used Willem Blackwood to commit war crimes against the Brackens, to, like, force the Brackens to join Daemon's army. And then young Oscar Tully came to Daemon and said, like, hey, you can't do that shit. You're not going to make any friends if you're running around doing war crimes in our land. And so Daemon was humbled last season, and he had to execute Willem Blackwood, and he also, through his visions, became convinced that Rhaenyra Targaryen is genuinely meant to be the chosen one. He believes that Rhaenyra truly must be the queen on the Iron Throne, and there's this whole prophecy about the Targaryens saving the world from the White Walkers. So it seems as though Daemon is now genuinely loyal to Rhaenyra in a way that he was not previously. And so I'm really curious to see where that goes. I mean, there's still tension between Daemon and Oscar. Like, Oscar here says that we have to bury our dead in the mud. But Daemon is like, no, let's just burn the dead. It'll be way easier. And Oscar's like, no, that's not how we do it here. And so Daemon sort of scoffs and sort of rolls his eyes. Look at this little smirk that he does. But it seems as though Daemon kind of backs down and goes along with what Oscar is saying. So it's really funny to see this like grown-ass man, this proud Valyrian dragon lord, sort of rolling his eyes and submitting to the wishes of this very young lord Oscar Tully. So remember, like, Oscar Tully is now the Lord of Riverrun. He rules the Riverlands, and he became lord after the death of his grandfather Grover Tully. Oscar Grover. In the books, there's also a Elmo Tully and a Kermit Tully. Elmo, Kermit, Grover, Oscar. Yes, they are named after Muppets. They're named after Sesame Street characters. George Martin never intended for this story to be made into a TV show. Like most of the story of the Dance of the Dragons, it was just like background lore that George made up at some point, but then he sort of accidentally wrote a 400-page history book about it in detail, and here we are with a TV show about it. It's very funny to me that they kept the Sesame Street names. So anyway, there's been a battle. So, Daemon and Oscar have rallied this army of Riverlords, and they were attacked by this army led by Jason Lannister. So remember, Jason was like the douchey lord of... let's pull up an image, shall we? So Jason Lannister, he was in charge of this Lannister army, and he brought some goddamn lions along in his army that we saw last season. And so it's very sad that we see those lions being killed at the start of this scene here. See in the bottom of the frame here, some of these men are butchering these lions. It looks like they're cutting off the lion's head on screen now. Isn't that sad? Those poor lions. So Jason led this army, and he's been defeated by the Riverlords. And also, we meet this new army of Northmen. So remember in Season 2, Episode 1, we met Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, at this time. And Cregan was like, well, I'm not going to send you, like, my best soldiers right now, but I can send you a bunch of old men. Because the North has this tradition where when winter is coming and when the hard times are coming, sometimes you send your old men off to die in a war so that there are fewer mouths to feed through winter. It's like this badass, tragic, grim mentality that the Northmen have. And so they're called the Winter Wolves, and they're all old veterans, and they came here to die and to be badass. And they have kind of like dodgy armor and arms, like they don't bring their best equipment, because they're not expecting to come back alive. They've come down here for a glorious death. In the books, they're all mounted, and they're called the Winter Wolves. And they're known for their ferocious war cries, so we get a good war cry. Their leader is Lord Roderick Dustin, who's called Roddy the Ruin because he's so old and decrepit. And so here in the show, it appears that the Winter Wolves have killed Jason Lannister. So remember, Jason Lannister is the twin brother of Tywin Lannister, who's the guy with Shariko at the battle. It's a very realistic-looking head, isn't it? I wonder if that's like a practical effect or like a CGI effect. It's pretty neat. So, what else is going on? So, Daemon and Oscar have fought the Westermen. Oh, you can see Black Alley Blackwood in the background here as well, actually. So, if we look at, this shot here, you see on the left there's a woman with dark eyes. That's Black Alley Blackwood. So let's pull up a picture of her. That is Black Ellie Blackwood. So she's a young member of House Blackwood, and she's 16 years old in the book. She's the aunt of the young Lord Blackwood. And Ellie is described as fierce, fearless, stubbornly strong, with a bawdy tongue, a rough sense of humor. She's a huntress, horsebreaker, and archer without peer, and she has little of a woman's softness. Some people think that Alice is gay because she shares a tent with Sabbatha Frey. At the Battle of the Burning Mill, Ellie is said to have killed Amos Bracken. So she's like a badass archer, warrior woman. I like how in the show she's got like black face paint around her eyes. I wonder if that's meant to like reduce glare from sunlight during battles. And I'm very curious like what Ellie thinks of Damon, because Damon killed Willem Blackwood, Ellie's relative. And I wonder if like Ellie, like what Ellie thought of Willem's war crimes that he did last season. There's like a shot in the trailers where Ellie is looking at Damon kind of skeptically. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this character brings to the story. So, we've met the Winter Wolves. We get a glimpse of Ellie Blackwood, and we've seen that Jason Lannister is dead. In the books, there's a bit about how in Jason Lannister's absence, the Westerlands get attacked by the Greyjoys. Remember the Ironborn, the Viking-y fellas. They attack the Lannister castle while Jason is gone. And I was kind of hoping that Jason would find that out in the TV show before he dies. Because they have mentioned Dalton Greyjoy in the TV show. So I was hoping that we'll hear more from the Greyjoys, but we'll have to wait and see. In the books, this whole battle is different. There's a battle called the Battle of the Red Fork. So the Lannister army fights the Riverlords Piper and Vance while they're trying to cross the Red Fork River. And Daemon and Caraxes aren't there in the books. Lord Jason Lannister gets killed by some random guy called Pate of Longleaf, and he becomes a knight called Longleaf the Lion Slayer. So there's a whole different little story in the books. A story that doesn't include any main characters. So I think in the show, they're choosing to simplify the battles, and they're choosing to like put the main characters in the battles, which makes a lot of sense. But we might get more battles between the Westermen and the Rivermen, because Daemon says there are more lions to hunt. So I'm also very curious to know how Daemon will react to his daughter Rhaena getting a dragon. Because it seemed like Daemon's whole thing was that he only cares about his family members when they have dragons. And so I think it'll be a big deal for him that Rhaena now has Sheepstealer. So elsewhere in the Riverlands, or perhaps the Crownlands, we get a scene with Criston Cole and Gwaine Hightower. So remember, Gwaine Hightower is the brother of Alicent Hightower. And Gwaine sort of seems like a posh, smarmy, arrogant boy a bit the first time we meet him. But here Gwaine is sort of standing up and being a voice of reason and a voice of morality against Criston Cole. So Criston Cole is the hand of the king for Aegon and Team Green. And Criston is a murderer. He's done a bunch of messed up stuff. He killed Joffrey Lonmouth at Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding. And he has killed Lyman Beesbury in Season 1. He's a brute. And he had sex with Rhaenyra early on, and that, broke his vows as a Kingsguard. They're meant to be chaste. They're not meant to have sex. And it just sort of imploded his brain that he wasn't able to follow the rules, and he wasn't able to keep to his vows. And he wanted to run away with Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra refused. And so Criston started to hate Rhaenyra. He became more aligned with Alicent, and then he started having sex with Alicent. And he's got this nihilistic worldview where he's like, well, I've broken the most sacred vows that I've sworn. My whole identity as a Kingsguard is ruined. And he seems to be like, well, if I can't keep my vows, I guess I might as well be a monster. I might as well be brutal. Like, he feels like he is doomed. He feels like he is cursed. He feels like he is irredeemable. So he's like, well, I guess we're just marching on to death. And he becomes this very, very dark, nihilistic character. So they're marching towards Harrenhal. The plan was that Criston and Gwaine would lead this army of Crownlanders to attack Daemon and the Rivermen at Harrenhal. But Aemon and Vhagar was meant to join them, and he hasn't come and joined them. So it's looking a bit weird. They're not sure if they're going to get the support that they need. As Gwaine is approaching, Gwaine sees that someone in their army has raped a woman. And so Gwaine comes to Criston and says, hey, we've got to do something about this. And Criston says, you can kill the rapist if you want, whatever. But Criston doesn't seem to care. And Gwaine is like, hey, no, like, this is important. You need to, like, make a statement to the men. You need to tell them not to do fucking war crimes. And so, like, this is an issue that we've seen before in Game of Thrones. Like, remember in Game of Thrones Season 1, we saw the Dothraki attacking and raping women in the Lazarene. And Daenerys tried to protect those women and tried to stop the rape. There's also a moment in Game of Thrones Season 8 where Jon Snow prevents a rape. So, like, you know, Game of Thrones author George Martin, he's interested in exploring, you know, the ideals and the glory and the nobility of war in fantasy, but to contrast that with the harsh, ugly realities of the evils of war. This series is always about the tension between idealism and harsh, ugly reality. And so Gwaine is saying, hey, like, we've got to keep our morality and do the right thing, even in this, like, dark war that we're in. And Criston is saying, hey, we're all doomed. We all will become beasts in the end. Doom and ruin surround us. We all will become beasts. So, you know, I think that Gwaine really embodies this sort of, you know, the importance of ideals and morality and hope, even in the darkest times. Like, some people argue that Game of Thrones is fundamentally cynical and nihilistic. Author George Martin is always saying no. Like the point of the darkness is to show the importance of heroism and morality in bad times. So yeah, this is what's going on with Gwaine and Criston, and it's looking like things will get worse before they get better. There's so much irony to the way Criston treats women. Like, remember in Season 1, Criston said, every woman is an image of the mother to be spoken of with reverence. Like, Criston uses the language of respect and faith and religion, even while he does evil and allows evil in his camp. And so there's all sorts of contradictions to Criston, I think. And they really shouldn't have made this guy Hand of the King, should they? Because Criston is like kind of the second most powerful man in the realm, at least in Team Green. But he was such a terrible choice, because the Hand of the King used to be Otto Hightower. And Otto Hightower was a politician. He knew how to do politics, and he was trying to be smart about getting the war done. He also was largely responsible for starting the war. But Criston doesn't know politics. Criston doesn't know how to, you know, make peace and do diplomacy. So he was a terrible choice for Hand of the King. Alright, so we also get some scenes with Ulf and Hugh and Adam. So these guys are some of the new dragon riders on Team Rhaenyra. Should we do a little dragon check? Let's check in with the dragons. So Team Green, Aegon's team, has 4 dragons, ? So, like, Aegon had Sunfire. So Sunfire is this beautiful golden dragon, and Sunfire fought at Rook's Rest in Season 2, Episode 4, and Sunfire was badly wounded, maybe dead. Criston said that Sunfire was long in the dying, so maybe Sunfire is dead, it's unclear. Aemond has Vhagar, which is the biggest, oldest, most fearsome dragon alive. It's an absolute beast. Helaena has Dreamfire, and we've barely properly seen Dreamfire. Apparently in the show, Helaena doesn't like to ride Dreamfire, so we haven't seen Dreamfire. But Dreamfire is one of the older, bigger dragons, so Dreamfire could be important. Daeron has Tessarion, and we maybe haven't seen Daeron yet. Daeron hasn't been properly introduced, but Tessarion is a young, beautiful blue dragon. Syrax is the dragon of Rhaenyra on Team Black. Caraxes is the dragon of Daemon. Vermax is the young dragon of Jace, who dies this episode. Moondancer, the young dragon of Baelor. Joffrey and Aegon have young dragons, but they're too small and young to be important in this war. Hugh and Ulf and Adam are the new dragon riders, who have Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke, who are all big, formidable dragons. So this is why, like, Rhaenyra seems to be winning the war right now. Like, the Greens have bigger armies, but Team Black has more dragons. However, unfortunately, Hugh, Ulf, and Adam and their dragons are useless this episode because they're camping near Harrenhal, near the God's Eye. So Rhaenyra has sent them here to ambush Vhagar, because Alicent told Rhaenyra that Aemond and Vhagar are going to Harrenhal. So Rhaenyra apparently hopes for these guys to kill Vhagar, but Aemond has changed his mind and isn't going to Harrenhal. So there's a whole bunch of miscommunication and a comedy of errors going on this episode, which amounts to these three blokes sitting around in the woods when they could have been helping at the Gullet. In the books, they are helping at the Gullet. In the books, Ulf and Hugh and Adam and their dragons, they do fight at the Gullet, but this is a change from the books. I think they're trying to focus the story more, or focus this battle more, on Rhaena and Baela and Jace. You've got to pick a character for the battle to be about, I suppose. And Corlys and Shariko and Rhaena, Baela, Jace is what they chose to focus it around. But there is an awkwardness to these characters, literally sitting around doing nothing when they could be at the battle. We get a bit of characterization of these characters, though. We see how, Ulf is unhappy with the situation and he's complaining. And he's like, hey, we should get a castle. We should get to be lords. We should get all this cool stuff. We should leave because I don't like this place. Whereas Ulf and Adam are a bit more obedient and respectful of Rhaenyra. We do get to see a green man, though, so don't worry about that. That's exciting. So remember that Hugh is a blacksmith. And Hugh is apparently the bastard son of Sarah Targaryen, who was a princess who went and joined a brothel to piss off her dad, King Jaehaerys. And Hugh said that he was ashamed of her. So Hugh is a cousin of Daemon and Viserys. So that's where Hugh got his dragon riding Targaryen blood. Ulf is just some bloke from the pub. And he tells this story this episode about how he grew up on the streets and he never knew his mother, but he liked the idea that he was a dragon seed. He was sort of told that idea by a red priest. There was this red priest, remember Melisandre was a red priestess in Game of Thrones, and Thoros was a red priest. It's the religion of R'hllor, the Lord of Light. So apparently this red priest fancied Ulf and paid Ulf to do things. So it sounds as though Ulf might have been sexually abused or something. And this priest said that Ulf had king's blood. Remember in Game of Thrones, Melisandre said Gendry had king's blood because Gendry was a bastard of King Robert. And Melisandre tried to sacrifice Gendry in magical rituals. There's similar plot lines in the books with Edric Storm. So I wonder if the Red Priest in Ulf's story might have been trying to use Ulf's king's blood for magic rituals. It's sort of also reminiscent of Varys's backstory in the books. In the books, a priest cut off Varys's genitals and burned them for a magic spell, and so some fans think that maybe Varys has king's blood, and that's why the priest used Varys's body for magic spells. There's all sorts of weird possibilities here. But, I like this sort of humanization of Ulf. We learned that Ulf came from a really tough background and that this story of him being a dragon seed is kind of what gave him the confidence to believe in himself. He created this identity of Ulf the dragon seed. It's similar to how Tyrion and Jon Snow use their identities as armor. There's so much in these books about creating identities as a source of strength. So it's nice to see that side of Ulf, but at the same time, Ulf is being very selfish. Because he's like, I want a castle, I want women, I want to get all these material things, and he's not being very respectful or obedient to Rhaenyra. But it's also well, that makes sense, because he grew up on the streets. He needs to prioritize his material needs, because he had to all his life. So I like how, the backgrounds of these characters inform what their goals are. Adam is a bit different to Ulf and Hugh, because Adam knows that his father is Corlys Velaryon. We don't know where Adam got his dragon riding blood, because we don't know who Adam and Alan's mother was. In the books, there is a story about their mother was a woman named Merilda, and Merilda was a badass sailor, and she had her own fleet of ships. But, we don't know if Merilda had Targaryen blood. She probably did, because Dragonstone has lots of dragon seeds, bastards of the Targaryens. So it probably is the case that Alan and Adam's mother had Targaryen blood, because Corlys doesn't have Targaryen blood. He's a Velaryon. The Velaryons are not dragon riders. Not until they married Rhaenys Targaryen. So there's all sorts of mystery. And, like, one of the theories, like, one of the questions is, like, well, hey, maybe you actually don't need Targaryen blood to ride a dragon. Like, Jace kind of said that last season. He was like, well, maybe you don't have to be a dragon lord to ride a dragon. And that's one of the ideas that the character Nettles introduces. Like, some people think that maybe Nettles doesn't have Targaryen blood. Maybe the idea that you need special blood is a lie. And maybe the idea that some people are superior to others because of what's in their blood, maybe that's a lie. I think that's an interesting question that the story might be playing with. So, and Adam has the dragon Seasmoke, and Seasmoke was the dragon of Laenor, and Laenor was Adam's half-brother, is Adam's half-brother. It's another question, like, how can you claim Seasmoke when Seasmoke's rider Laenor is, as far as we know, still alive? It seemed to be that you can't claim a dragon until the dragon's previous rider is dead, but in the show, Laenor is still alive, so it seems like they're changing that rule. It's all very mysterious. I remember also that Hugh has a wife named Kat, and Hugh and Kat had a daughter, and the daughter died. And Kat said to Hugh, I don't want you to go and claim a dragon. Like, I want you to come with me to Tumbleton where we can be safe. And Hugh was like, nah, I gotta do this. So, like, Hugh is on his own journey of trying to, like, uncover his Targaryen identity, to discover what he can be with dragon power. I like that arc that Hugh is on. I remember also that in season 2, we saw Hugh trying to get food for his family. And he heard that Rhaenyra was giving food in those boats, and he saw people running around with arms full of food. And instead of go to the boats to get some food for his family, Hugh punched some random innocent person and, like, mugged this person and took his food. It was only a brief moment, but we saw a level of brutality and a level of doing some dick moves from Hugh. So I wonder how his personality will evolve. So we get all this, like, characterization and this backstory with Ulf and Hugh and Adam. Hugh mentions that Vhagar and Aemond have killed at least 2 dragons. So the first kill that we saw from Vhagar was that Vhagar killed Arax, the dragon of Luke, in season 1, episode 10. 9? 10. And we also saw Vhagar kill Melis, the dragon of Rhaenys, last season. And Vhagar also badly wounded Aegon's dragon, Sunfire. So yeah, Vhagar is the most dangerous thing alive right now, and that is the main problem for Team Black. And that's why Rhaenyra is so excited that Vhagar has apparently left King's Landing, and that's why Rhaenyra wants to take King's Landing this episode. So yeah, Ulf says that he's excited to get a castle, because Ulf thinks that... Because Rhaenyra said that she would make Ulf and Hugh and Adam into knights. And Ulf thinks that, well, if we become knights, we'll get to have a castle. And Hugh and Adam here say that, no, that's not true. Knights don't automatically get castles. Only lords get castles. And I think technically both of them are wrong. Like, usually lords have castles, and knights sometimes don't have castles, but knights sometimes do have castles. You can be a landed knight, and you can have a small castle or a big castle. Sir Gerald Dane has a big castle in the books. And there are some lords who don't have castles. Like Davos Seaworth is a lord who doesn't have a castle, as far as we know. Littlefinger was a lord who didn't have a castle. He just had a little tower on the fingers. So it depends. It's complicated. But I think the point is that, like, these are common-born bastard men, and they don't know the rules of being a fancy, rich, noble person. They don't know how this works, and so there's a culture clash, and there's, like, a difference in values and a difference in priorities here. So yeah, this whole sequence is a change from the books. In the books, Adam, Ulf, and Hugh are at the Gullet, but here they come out and are by the God's Eye Lake. Although this is, like, a little bit inspired by the books, because in the books, there is a bit that says that Adam and Seasmoke flew to the Isle of Faces on the God's Eye, and they encountered a green man. And so the green man is like this weird satyr thing with antlers that we see. And we saw a green man in season 2 as well. Yeah, this weird guy on screen now with the antlers. So these green men, they seem to be protectors of the Isle of Faces, and they're connected to the old gods, which is the magic of skin changing and green sight. It's the magic that Bran Stark uses in Game of Thrones. And so it's the magic of nature, and it's sort of the old primal ancient magic that predates humanity. It's associated with blood magic and crazy stuff. And so there's all this mystery about like what the Green Men are up to on the Isle of Faces. And there's theories that Bran Stark might be some green king, some old god's magical green king guarded by the Green Men is some speculation of what might happen in the books. So that's very interesting, and yeah, it is loosely based on a sentence from the books that mentions that Adam met the Green Man on the Isle of Faces. But before we see the Green Man, we see Del the Goat. I think Del the Goat is my favorite returning character in House of the Dragon. So we saw Del the Goat back in Harrenhal in Season 2. We can probably pull up a picture of Del the Goat. Yeah, there's Del the Goat in Season 2, Episode 4. And so Del the Goat is, maybe Del the Goat is Alice Rivers, the witch, because right after Del appears, startling Ulf while he's pooping, we then see Alice, who turns up and says, "Oh yeah, I'm a witch." And so I think like it might be that, you know, Alice controls Del, or Alice can transform into Del. Like Alice uses Del to spy and keep an eye on things. She's like a witch's familiar, you know? And this fits with some of the ideas in the books. Like in the books, the Greenseer Bloodraven can see through the eyes of animals, and, you know, wargs like Jon Snow can see through the eyes of his wolf. So, you know, maybe Alice is a goat shifter, a goat warg. Maybe she sees through Del. I think it's also possible that Alice is a green man. Like it's like. Or a child of the forest. Remember the children of the forest, or those weird, like, hippie elves? Like there was the child of the forest Leaf in Game of Thrones. I think it's possible that Alice might be one of those. Because there is something in the books that suggests that the children of the forest can take on human form. These are the children of the forest in Season 4. They're like the weird pixies who hang out with Bran and Bloodraven. And they may have created the White Walkers and let them get out of control. That's a whole thing. So I think it's possible that Alice is one of those in magical disguise. In any case, Alice seems connected to the old gods. Like she was using that magic to give Daemon his visions last season. But my question is, like, what are Alice's goals? Because Alice here says to Adam and Hugh and Ulf, like, hey, you guys should go to the Gullet. You guys should be helping Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra needs you. So it seems as though Alice wants to help Rhaenyra. But I also wonder if it's possible if Alice is like playing Rhaenyra and Aegon's team against each other. Because it seems to me that if Alice is connected to the magic of the trees, I think the trees probably don't like the fire-breathing lizards. I think that the old gods don't like the dragons, is my guess. And so I wonder if Alice is playing them against each other. But it is very mysterious. I mean, Alice's plotline in the books is unfinished. You'll never believe this, but George Martin hasn't actually finished this book series. So, like, this show is mostly based on a book called Fire and Blood, which covers 130 years of Targaryen history. And George Martin says he's going to write another volume of Fire and Blood called Blood and Fire, which will tell the next 170 years of Game of Thrones history. And Alice's story, it gets cut off between those two volumes. We don't actually know the full story of Alice Rivers yet. So this is an interesting open mystery in the books as well as the show. So, yeah, green men, goats, witches, oh my. I think it's cool that they're using some of these weird fantasy elements. Because, like, Game of Thrones, the show was always kind of embarrassed to be a fantasy show. The Game of Thrones show removed a lot of the magical fantasy elements, so it's nice to see a lot of that stuff being included here in the show. I think it's neat that Ulf is sitting on a weirwood branch, or rather a branch that looks kind of pale, and so I wonder if it's a weirwood tree, because the weirwoods are the trees of the old gods that are all magical. All right, let's talk about Aemond and Alicent, shall we? Can we talk about Aemond and Alicent? So Aemond has taken over King's Landing. He's acting as though he's the king. Their leader is supposed to be Aegon, the older brother of Aemond, but Aemond attacked Aegon last season. Aemond burned Aegon with his dragon at Rook's Rest. And now Aemond is sitting on the throne, and he's holding the sword Blackfire, the sword of kings. And Alicent's letter refers to Aemond as King Aemond, and one of the guards at the Red Keep calls Aemond King. So Aemond hasn't explicitly called himself king yet, but it sure is looking like Aemond is stealing the throne from his brother. Which is similar to what's going on in the books. And Alicent is surprised to see her son Aemond on the throne. Because remember, Alicent is coming from the conversation she had with Rhaenyra last season. Last season, Alicent sneaked onto Dragonstone, talked to Rhaenyra, and Alicent said, I made mistakes. I should not have been working to put Aegon on the throne. I was wrong to think that I could rule through my sons. I was wrong to think that my husband Viserys wanted Aegon on the throne. I was wrong to think I could be happy doing all of this. Turns out I cannot use the patriarchy for my own purposes. It's using me, and now it's discarded me. Alicent felt disempowered and helpless last season because no one listened to her. She thought that she could rule through Aegon, but it turned out she could not. So she came to Rhaenyra and she was like, okay, you know what? Let me go free. Alicent said, let me go free with my daughter Helena and my granddaughter Jaehaera, and you can have the throne and you can have the realm. And Rhaenyra said, well, what do I do about your sons? I have to kill Aegon. And Alicent said, okay, you can kill my son Aegon. Interestingly, Alicent didn't say what she wanted to happen with her son Aemond and with her other son Daeron. That's an open question to me. I'm a little bit frustrated that the show has not clarified like what Alicent's plan is, because in this episode it seems a bit like Alicent is trying to save Aemond, because Alicent convinces Aemond to leave King's Landing before Rhaenyra's dragons come. So Alicent is kind of saving Aemond from Rhaenyra, but Alicent is also helping Rhaenyra win the war. Alicent wants Rhaenyra to win the war. And Alicent knows that if Rhaenyra gets the throne, Rhaenyra is gonna have to kill Alicent's sons. She has been saying that with Otto for years and years. So it's a little bit unclear to me what Alicent's plan is exactly here. But what she's trying to do is help Rhaenyra. And maybe save Aemond as well. And to do that, she's doing a whole bunch of sneaky, manipulative little things this episode, because that's kind of all she can do. No one listens to her commands directly, so she has to like send a letter in Aemond's name, and she has to like manipulate Aemond, and it's all complicated and messy. The first scene with Aemond, though, is with Orwyle. So remember, Orwyle is the Grand Maester from the Citadel. He's an advisor to Aemond. And last season, Orwyle helped Alicent sneak onto Dragonstone. I don't know how he did that, but he did that. And so, at the start of this episode, Aemond drags Orwyle out of bed and puts him on an executioner's block and threatens to behead him. And Orwyle must be thinking, oh shit, Aemond found out that I secretly smuggled Alicent to Dragonstone. But Aemond says, you let Aegon escape. And Orwyle is like, huh? Because Aegon escaped with Larys Strong, and Orwyle did not do that. He's innocent of that, and so it's all just embarrassing and confusing for everyone involved. Aemond is wrongly accusing Orwyle. He doesn't know what's going on, but he's about to cut off Orwyle's head anyway, which is really stupid. And he only stops because Jasper Wilde, Ironrod, tells him that Larys is also missing, so they realize that Larys was responsible. But yeah, it's a big old mess, and it's becoming very clear that Aemond is not very well suited to be a ruler. It's interesting that, you know, Aemond is about to execute a Grand Maester with the sword Blackfire, which is very similar to what King Maegor did. King Maegor the Cruel is renowned as one of the worst Targaryen kings ever because of his brutality and all the wars that he started. Here's some delightful artwork by Chili Raven Art of Maegor. Maegor is renowned as one of like the worst kings ever, and one of the things that he did was he killed like 4 Grand Maesters because the Maesters disapproved of Maegor stealing his nephew's crown. And here Aemond is stealing his brother's crown, so there are lots of parallels between Aemond and Maegor. Aemond is very rash and violent in the books, although in the books there's nothing about Aemond attacking Aegon. And in the books it does sound like Aegon loves Aemond, because Aegon wants to build a giant golden statue of Aemond, whereas in the show Aegon wants to kill Aemond. So that's a conflict that is invented for the show. So, Aemond is flailing. Aemond is a teenager who is full of ambition and pride and anger and fear, and he's lashing out with violence because no one taught him how to rule. So, in this episode, Alicent says, "Man, I really messed up because I didn't teach Aegon how to rule." And Alicent says, "Oh, Aemond, you would be a much better king." But it's obvious that Aemond is also way too rash and violent and silly. He shouldn't be king either. And I think it's interesting how Alicent says, "Well, it's my fault. I'm their mother. I should have taught them better." Because we saw all through the earlier seasons of House of the Dragon, Aegon and Alicent didn't get much attention from their parents. We see Alicent shouting at Aegon and Aemond and hitting Aegon occasionally, and Viserys seemed to never talk to Aegon and Aemond at all, apart from shouting at them occasionally. So you do wonder if Aegon and Aemond might be a bit better equipped to handle power if they had been parented or taught a little bit more. So, Aemond asks Alicent where she was when she disappeared to Dragonstone, and Alicent says, "Oh, I was just camping with the Kingsguard Rickard Thorne." And Aemond is like, "Huh, okay, whatever." I think that if Aemond was smart, he would question Rickard Thorne, who could say that, no, Alicent wasn't with him camping. But Aemond doesn't question anybody. He also doesn't question Orwyle. He's not being very smart about this. And so Alicent is suddenly very afraid because Aemond says that he's not going off to Harrenhal, he's staying in King's Landing. And that ruins Alicent's plan because Alicent promised Rhaenyra that, Aegon will be here in King's Landing and you can kill him. And Alicent promised Rhaenyra, well, Aemond is leaving with Vhagar, so you don't have to worry about Vhagar attacking you. And Alicent said, I will make sure that King's Landing surrenders to you, Rhaenyra. But now Aemond is not backing down. So Alicent's whole plan with Rhaenyra is falling apart. I mean, I think it's kind of a ridiculous plan. I'm not really convinced that Alicent's plan makes sense. Alicent said, I will open the gates of King's Landing to you, Rhaenyra. But I don't know if Rhaenyra needs Alicent's help to take King's Landing, because Rhaenyra has 6 or 7 dragons. Wait, how many dragons does she have? She has 1, 2... Well, she hasn't got Caraxes right now, but she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... She's got 6 dragons, including Moondancer, not including Caraxes. I don't think she needs the gates to open. She can fly over the gates. She can fly right to the Red Keep and eat whoever refuses her until the city surrenders. And also, we spent all of Season 2 saying that no one obeys Alicent. Alicent has no authority. Alicent said last season that Helaena has authority and people will listen to Helaena, but when have we ever seen anyone listen to Helaena? When have we ever seen Helaena have authority? So I think that Alicent's plan kind of makes no sense, but what she's trying to do this episode is keep her promise. She's trying to convince Aemond to leave, she's trying to find Aegon and bring him back, and she's trying to make sure King's Landing will surrender to Rhaenyra. So it's all a big fustercluck, and we get another scene with Alicent and Helaena. So remember, Helaena is the daughter of Alicent and Viserys, and Helaena is odd. Helaena likes bugs, and she has visions of the future. She doesn't seem very interested in being queen. She doesn't seem interested in winning the war. She's just a little oddball who likes to travel through time and space. Remember last episode, Helaena told Aemond that Aemond will die at the God's Eye, which is the lake near Harrenhal. So I wonder if that's part of why Aemond doesn't go to Harrenhal, is because Helaena said that he would die near Harrenhal. In the books, Helaena is very different. The books say that Helaena is mad with grief after the murder of her son, Jaehaerys. Remember, Helena's young son was murdered in front of her in Season 2, Episode 1. So in the books, it says that Helaena was a broken woman and she spent her days in darkness weeping. The show is a bit different. Helena doesn't seem as impacted by the death of Jaehaerys, and she's just kind of here at the moment. I hope Helena does something more interesting next time we see her, because currently she's just sort of here, and she says that Aemond is afraid. Alicent hides her plan from Helena. Like, Alicent lies about what she's up to. She doesn't share her plans with Helena, which I think is ironic because Helena can see the future. I think that Helena probably knows that Alicent is lying, and Helena knows that Alicent met Rhaenyra. I think Helena might know all this stuff that's happening, but Alicent doesn't understand Helena. Alicent doesn't have a good relationship with Helena, no more than she does with Aegon or Aemond, so tragically these two aren't on the same frequency. But anyway, Alicent writes a letter to Aemond Hightower. And the letter tells Aemond and his army to stay in the Reach and to not come to King's Landing right away. It's a lie, it's a deception, because Alicent signs the letter from King Aemond Targaryen instead of from Alicent Hightower, which is, treason. Alicent could get in a lot of trouble for this, but she's trying to help Rhaenyra by delaying the Hightower army. I think it doesn't make much sense for Alicent to sign King Aemond Targaryen, because Alicent is trying to help Rhaenyra. Alicent promised that Rhaenyra could kill King Aegon, because that would end the war. But if Alicent starts to recognize Aemond as the king, that means that killing Aegon might not end the war so much, because Aemond is still king, So I don't understand why Alicent signs it King Aemond. I guess, she thinks that everyone thinks that Aemond is king now, so she has to say King Aemond, because people know that Aegon has fled. I don't know, this is a very, odd little complicated subplot that's going on, but Alicent's trying to keep her promise to Rhaenyra. So, then we get a scene with Alicent and Aemond. So, Alicent is trying to convince Aemond to leave King's Landing and go to Harrenhal. And this is a very weird relationship, and this is a very weird conversation, because, on the one hand, Alicent is telling the truth. Alicent is being vulnerable. She's admitting that she made mistakes and she didn't raise Aegon very well. But Alicent also manipulates Aemond. She says that, well, you should have been king. You would be a better king. And you're so brave, and you should do this and that. And there's a tragedy here, because, there is sincerity and truth here, but there's also manipulation. And it reminds me of Otto and Alicent's relationship. Otto manipulated Alicent all her life. Otto told Alicent what she wanted. Otto pushed Alicent into this war. Otto pushed Alicent into politics. And now Alicent is manipulating Aemond in a similar way, so it's really tragic, I think. Alicent says that Aegon is not a good king, and Aemond says Aegon's frailties are his own. And I think that's a really interesting line, because frailty is weakness. Aemond is implying that Aegon is a bad king because he's weak. But I don't think that the problem with Aegon is weakness. I think the problem with Aegon is that he's unwise, he's ignorant, he's impulsive, he's cruel, he raped Diana, he killed 99 innocent rat catchers. Aegon knows nothing about politics, and that's why he's a terrible king. That's the problem, not frailty. But Aemond is this young man with this enormous power of Vhagar, and so Aemond thinks that everything is about strength. Aemond only understands the strong and the weak, and that's why Aemond is also unsuited to be king. But, he's full of fear, and he's not thinking straight, and it's all very messy. And also, Aemond has a lot of messed up, confused sexual energy and loneliness, and this results in Aemond kissing his mother, Alicent. And this is not some little affectionate peck. This is a long, intense kiss. And Alicent is terrified. So, we learned in Season 1 that Aemond had sex with a sex worker named Sylvie. Sylvie is this older woman who took Aemond's virginity. And as far as we know, this is the only person who Aemond has had sex with. We see Aemond with Sylvie much later in Season 2. And, we saw Sylvie, cradling, holding Aemond while he's curled up in a fetal position. And so you get this sense that Aemond is really craving intimacy, and he's craving a mother's love. like, Aemond, I don't think, feels loved by Alicent. Like, it seems like Alicent mostly ignored Aemond growing up. And so Aemond, in this, like, incestuous mixed-up family where, like, you know, Aegon marries his sister Helena, and Daemon's having sex dreams about his mother, Alyssa. There's all this incest going on, and Aemond is, like, looking for intimacy in all the wrong places. And Aemond kisses his mother, Alicent, and so it's a very fucked up, weird moment. And Alicent is terrified. I love this face that look at this face that Olivia makes. She's afraid and disgusted, and she doesn't know quite what to do. And I think she's thinking, "Damn, I might not have raised this kid right. This kid was not raised right." So, yeah, it's a disturbing moment. And I like how they're leading into this, like, weird psychosexual stuff. Because, of course, the Targaryens are weird and messed up. I mean, look at those murals on the walls. Like, since Season 1, there have been these murals of orgies on the walls, with all these humans having sex with each other and dragons having sex with each other. Like, I mean, the family tree, the Targaryen family tree, it doesn't look like a tree. It looks like a straight line because they've been inbreeding for centuries. And, you know, Matt Smith and Ewan have Habsburg chins like the Hightower. They're all weird and messed up, and that's what we're saying. So, I wonder what Alicent's feelings are about Aemond. That's one of the biggest questions for me right now, because it's like, I don't think Alicent wants all her children to die. Like, I think Alicent reluctantly accepted that her son Aegon must die to end the war, but it's unclear to me what Alicent wants to happen to Aemond. I wonder if Alicent thinks that it might still be possible for her to save Aemond. And I also wonder what Alicent wants for Daeron, her youngest son, who we haven't officially seen yet. Because Daeron is supposedly the good kid, the kind kid. So surely Alicent wants to save Daeron, but she hasn't explained any plan to do that. So, yeah, I'm very curious about Alicent. And this is a big change from the books. In the books, Alicent is not having secret meetings with Rhaenyra. Alicent wants Rhaenyra dead, and has for years. In the books, Rhaenyra and Alicent despise each other and want to murder each other's families. I mean, the show, from a very early point, decided that, okay, we're going to focus this story on Alicent and Rhaenyra. The show decided to make Alicent and Rhaenyra the main characters. And I think that makes sense, because the show needs main characters. Like, the book doesn't really have main characters a lot of the time. You know, sometimes Daemon is important, sometimes Rhaenyra is important, but sometimes we're following, like, you know, Kristen or Pate of Longleaf, or, you know, Alan Beesbury and Alan Tarley. Like the main characters sometimes don't do much. In this period of the book, Alicent does basically nothing. And so I think that the show's like, well, we need an emotional through line. We need a relationship at the heart of the story. So let's center Rhaenyra and Alicent, and let's lean into the themes of, like, gender and patriarchy. Let's lean into the idea that the history books demonize these women unfairly. Like, those are also themes in the books. And so I think it makes sense to center the story on Alicent and Rhaenyra. But I think that the show is creating some weird plot lines that don't make much sense as a result. Because Alicent doesn't have anything big to do at this point in the story. And so the show is trying to think of things for Alicent to do without contradicting the books too much, but like also to keep things sympathetic. And so you get these weird little changes to the books, some of which I think are weak. Like the whole, like, sending the letter to the Hightowers and, you know, Aegon and Aemond and swapping them about. I'm not entirely convinced by some of these plotlines personally, but we'll see where it goes. All right, let's go to Aemond Hightower, shall we? So Aemond Hightower is a cousin of Alicent, and he seems like a proper lad. He's in charge of the big Hightower army, and I think we get a lovely sense that the Hightowers are rich and proud and powerful. Like, look how orderly all of their tents are. Aemond is a guy who likes to keep things organized and proper, and he doesn't like any stinky messengers turning up. There's this very odd sort of detail here, that the messenger who brings the letter from Alicent is all poopy and stinky, for reasons that aren't explained. And Aemond doesn't like how stinky he is, so Aemond takes a little sniff from a little container of nice smelling things. I don't know what this object is. It looks like a religious censer, maybe, or just like a little pot of scented oils. I don't know exactly what this is. You get the sense that Ormond is maybe like a bit of a clean freak, or maybe he's very religious and proper and orderly. I don't know. It's an interesting characterization that they're going for. It's a funny little introduction to Lord Ormond Hightower. So Ormond Hightower is the son of Hobart Hightower, who used to be the Lord back in Season 1. Hobart is the older brother of Otto Hightower, and so Hobart died off screen, and so that's why Ormond is now the Lord. And he's leading this big Hightower army to help the Greens. I think it's very interesting that, Ormond gets this letter, and the letter says that Aemond is now king. And so Ormond is like, I guess King Aegon is dead. And Ormond just shrugs and says, well, one king is as good as another. That's a very relaxed reaction. His cousin, his king, Aegon, just died. You'd think that Ormond would give a shit, but he doesn't. And he's like, well, whatever, we'll go to war for Aemond instead. And so I wonder, what are Ormond's motivations? He clearly doesn't care about Aegon. He doesn't seem to care about that family very much. But maybe he's just in it for, the political victories of the Hightowers becoming more powerful. Because, if any of Alicent's sons become king, that should make the Hightowers more politically powerful. We also meet this character, Bold John Roxton, who's this knight over here with the sword. Bold John Roxton has a rare Valyrian steel sword called Orphan Maker, and he's reputed for his black temper, his anger, but here he just has a dorky little bowl cut. Curious to see what we get from Bold John Roxton. There's also a servant with Ormond, this young man here, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this servant might be Prince Daeron Targaryen. Maybe? Prince Daeron Targaryen hasn't been officially revealed. Daeron is the youngest son of Alicent and Viserys, and he's the good son, the kind son, apparently. And they haven't officially announced who's playing him, but unofficially it seems that this actor is playing him. That's what's been reported in various places. But, it's very weird to me. If this is Daeron, it's weird that they don't introduce him as Daeron. So, is the actor playing multiple characters? Is this a coincidence? What's going on here? Where's Daeron? I mean, we saw the dragon, Tessarion. This dragon here is Daeron's dragon, Tessarion. And there's a dragon keeper. So, Daeron should be around here somewhere. But he hasn't been formally introduced yet. Last season, they mentioned that Ormond's army has been attacked by Beesbury's. Some of the houses in the Reach are supporting Team Black instead of Team Green. And so I hope we do get to see Alan Beesbury and Alan Tarley attacking Ormond's army, as we do in the books. Because there's a whole little campaign that happens in the Reach in the books. Maybe we'll see some of it. So, yeah, Ormond gets the letter signed from King Aemond, and the letter tells Ormond and his army to wait and to stay here until Aemond comes and joins them in 3 days. So this is a lie, and this is a ploy by Alicent to try to delay the Hightower army, to try to help Rhaenyra win King's Landing. And Ormond doesn't like stinky people. Such an odd introduction. Okay, let's talk about Aegon and Larys. So Aegon is the reason this war started. One of the great ironies of all of this is that the war is supposedly being fought for King Aegon Targaryen to be on the throne. But no one likes Aegon, least of all Aegon, and everyone knows that Aegon is not a good king. And after Aemond burned Aegon last season, he is in a lot of pain and his legs don't work. And he's suffering very terribly. And he was secretly taken out of the city by Larys Strong. So Larys is the creepy spy master. Larys burned his own father and his own brother at Harrenhal. He sexually exploited Alicent last season. He seems to like feet. And Laris does sympathize with Aegon. Laris talked about how, Aegon is now physically disabled like Laris is, and therefore they have to use their minds. And Laris said that, Aegon can return to Westeros, to King's Landing, as a conqueror, and he will be a popular king. And that's what Aegon wants. Like in Season 1, Episode 9, when Aegon was crowned, it was kind of the first moment when Aegon thought, maybe I actually would like to be king. Aegon really enjoyed getting the adoration of the people. Because Aegon feels unloved. He was neglected by Viserys and Alicent growing up, it seems. And so Aegon does still want to be king, and Aegon has also said that he wants to kill his brother Aemond for burning him. So those are Aegon's motivations, and it seems as though Laris is using Aegon for power, and also Laris maybe genuinely cares and empathizes with Aegon somewhat as well. But yeah, mostly Aegon is just feeling pain and misery and feels that he's pathetic right now. So Aegon and Laris are sneaking through the Crown Lands. They're trying to go to Braavos in the east, but they're sneaking through Westeros and they get captured by the Stauntons. So the Stauntons are a house in the Crown Lands who support Rhaenyra, Team Black. The Stauntons are from Rook's Rest, which is the castle where Aegon was burned last season. And we see how brutal this war has become, because the Stauntons order Laris and Aegon to swear loyalty to Rhaenyra, and they threaten to kill anyone who doesn't swear their loyalty. And they're pretty quick to execute people who seem suspicious. So, Team Black is kind of portrayed as the good guys in this war. But even the good guys, even Rhaenyra's side, are out here killing random civilians on the slightest suspicion of being an enemy. Aegon laughs that he's being told to swear for the other side. Because these men don't realize that Aegon is the enemy king. The utter absurdity of it, Aegon just laughs at. And he also refuses to kneel, I think, out of a sense of pride. Aegon genuinely is too proud and too angry and too hateful to kneel for Rhaenyra. Or maybe it's just that his knees hurt too much. But there is still some pride in Aegon, despite everything. And once they realize that Aegon is Aegon, Laris immediately turns him in and says, yeah, this is the enemy king. And it seems a bit like Laris is betraying Aegon, but I think that it's also Laris is saving Aegon and Laris from being killed. So he convinces the Stauntons to keep them alive as hostages, and so maybe Laris and Aegon will try to escape later. But Laris does not help the random civilians who were traveling with them, and so they are killed brutally. So they're in a very dangerous spot, and Laris and Aegon are going to have to see if they can talk their way out of this situation. It's a very odd couple, Laris and Aegon, because they're similar in some ways, but Laris is so smart and cunning and duplicitous, whereas Aegon is just so stupid and impulsive and honest in a way. So I'm looking forward to the interactions we get with these characters. There is something kind of similar happening with these two in the books, but the idea of them being captured like this is new, so I'm curious to see where it's going. I like the line, Laris says that Aegon was lustrated in dragonfire. Lustration is a word that means to purify or cleanse in religious ritual, as though Aegon has been transformed by the dragon flame and become a new person. I think that's kind of a legend that Laris is trying to create. Last season, Laris said to Aegon, you have already written yourselves into the history books because you survived dragonfire. You're the king who would not burn. And so, I think Laris is very deliberately trying to develop this idea of Aegon as this mythical figure, this mythical king who survived dragon flame. And Aegon is not an impressive mystical figure, but Laris might want to use that idea in propaganda because Laris understands the difference between reality and political image. And remember, characters like Daenerys. Daenerys in Game of Thrones, she was burned. She walked into a pyre in Season 1 and she survived. And so that idea of being mystically renewed by fire is something that is in the story. So the Stauntons have Aegon and Laris. which could end the war. The Stauntons decide to take Aegon and Larys to Duskendale, and then they'll get a ship to Dragonstone to give Aegon to Rhaenyra. So if Rhaenyra catches King Aegon, that could theoretically end the war. So this is a big deal. We'll see how it plays out. All right, let's talk about Rhaenyra on Dragonstone. But first, maybe we'll respond to a few super chats real quick. Why don't we do that? If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, you can use the Streamlabs link in the video description. That's the best way to ask a question. And we will respond to most of the Streamlabs and the super chats towards the end of the live stream. Yanverb says, "Where is Tyland? Is he safe? Is he all right?" Yeah, this episode we see Shariko push Tyland into the ocean, and it looks like Tyland might die because he's wearing armor that might cause him to drown. But I really hope he survives. Tyland has an interesting, fascinating storyline in the books, so I really hope that Tyland survives. Andrew says, "This is why you need a license for a machine gun." Yeah, the dragons are weapons of mass destruction, and I think it's a bad idea to let random teenagers use weapons of mass destruction whenever they like in a war. This series has always been about power and the ethics of power and how we should use power, and how power changes us. And so I think that not everyone should be flying around on dragons. Juby says, "I'm sorry, but the Sheepstealer plot is too outrageous. It was too way out of the story. When Sheepstealer brought sheep to eat instead of the opposite, I was out." Yeah, well, I suppose we should call Sheepstealer Sheepbringer instead now, shouldn't we? Because in the books, Nettles brings sheep to Sheepstealer to convince Sheepstealer to accept her as rider, whereas here, Sheepstealer just seems to take pity on Rhaena, and instead Sheepstealer brings sheep to Rhaena to keep her alive. So it's a bit of a different dynamic. I mean, maybe that's part of why Sheepstealer doesn't obey Rhaena. Because, you know, Rhaena wasn't providing food for Sheepstealer. Sheepstealer was providing food for Rhaena, so maybe Sheepstealer thinks that he is in command. Yeah. Jenny of Coldstone Creamery, thanks for the donation, says, "I think Ormond's object is called a pomander." A pomander? What is a pomander? I've never heard of such a word. It's a ball made for perfumes, such as ambergris, musk, or civet. The pomander was worn or carried in a case as a protection against infection. That's what Wikipedia says. Yeah, I think you're right. That looks like it might be a pomander. Ormond's pomander. Yeah, that might be it. Thanks, Jenny. All right, we will do the rest of the super chats and Streamlabs donations towards the end of this live stream. Thank you, everyone, for your kind donations. And remember, Dragon Time Season 3, Episode 1 is out now. There are Dragon Time chats with Shrift and Glidus about every episode of House of the Dragon and every episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It is 70 hours of exclusive Dragon Talk that's on nebula.tv/AltSwiftX. And you can get 50% off if you sign up in the link in the video description. So thank you very much if you check out Nebula, and Nebula will have our first reactions and first coverage of the Mad King play that's coming up in July. So if you check out Nebula, that's a good way to support this channel. Thank you. All right, let's talk about Rhaenyra and Jace. So Rhaenyra is the leader of Team Black fighting against Aegon and Team Green. Rhaenyra is on Dragonstone, which is near the gullet where the battle happens. Should we do a little geography corner? Let's do a little geography corner. So this is King's Landing in the middle here. This is where Aemond and Alicent are. Dragonstone is where Rhaenyra is. So Dragonstone and Driftmark are both in the Gullet near King's Landing. And so the Triarchy are sailing from Essos in the east here, and they come and attack the Velaryon fleet in the Gullet, and they burn High Tide, which is on the island of Driftmark. So the Triarchy went past Dragonstone to Driftmark to burn High Tide. Duskendale was captured by Criston and the Greens recently, and Rook's Rest is where that big battle happened. So a lot of these battles have happened in this area, the Crown Lands, while Harrenhal is over here, and Harrenhal is where Daemon captured last season. and the Rivermen are rallied in the Riverlords fighting the Westermen, who came from the Westerlands over here in the west, while the Northmen march down from the north, and Old Town is where the Hightowers are from, and this is where Ormond Hightower came from. That was Geography Corner. Okay, so Rhaenyra met with Alicent last season, and Alicent said, Rhaenyra, I went too far in a few places. Aegon should not be king. So, you know what? I will help you take King's Landing. I will let you kill Aegon, and I just ask that you let me go free, and I get to run off and be with Helena and Jaehaera. And so Rhaenyra's like, great, fantastic, I'll take King's Landing then. Because Alicent said that Aemond and Vhagar will be off in Harrenhal, and Vhagar is the biggest threat to Rhaenyra. So Rhaenyra's like, you beauty, I'll take the capital, it'll be hunky-dory. But when Rhaenyra tells this to her council and her son Jace, they say, that's a terrible idea. How can that possibly be true? How can we possibly trust Alicent? She's the mother of the enemy. She is the enemy. How can we trust her? But Rhaenyra is excited and she's full of confidence, especially after the Red Sowing in Season 2, when Rhaenyra got 3 more dragon riders. Rhaenyra feels like she's destined to win. Remember, Viserys told Rhaenyra about Aegon's dream, that a Targaryen is destined to unite the realm and save the world from the White Walkers. Daemon believes the same thing and knelt to Rhaenyra. Daemon, said that he saw the visions as well last season. So Rhaenyra is full of an almost religious fanaticism. She believes that she can't fail. We're on a mission from God. We cannot fail, like in the Blues Brothers. So what could possibly go wrong? But from Jace's point of view, it seems like Rhaenyra is being crazy. How can she possibly trust Alicent? It seems nuts. Rhaenyra has done a bunch of crazy loose cannon stuff lately, like Rhaenyra secretly meeting with Alicent in King's Landing, additional to the other secret meeting that she had with Alicent last season. Rhaenyra's being a loose cannon. So Jace tries to convince her not to go to King's Landing. It really does sound like a trap. And then Baelor turns up, and Baelor says, hey, there's a battle happening in the Gullet. Rhaenyra says, I'll go and join the battle, it'll be great. And Jace is like, no, you can't go and get yourself killed, you'll die. You're the queen. If you die, then it's all for nothing. So Jace is very frustrated, because for the past, couple of seasons, Rhaenyra has been trying to keep Jace out of the war. And he's a young man who's trying to prove himself and prove his power, so he's extremely frustrated. And also, Jace just lost his brother Luke. Jace doesn't want to lose his mother as well. So Jace tries to protect Rhaenyra and tries to prove himself by locking Rhaenyra in her room and going off to the battle himself. Which is also very impulsive, but that's what he does. But it puts Laurent Marbrand in a really tricky position. Laurent Marbrand is this Queensguard. And Laurent Marbrand is sworn to obey Queen Rhaenyra. And he's sworn to obey Jace, Prince Jace. He's sworn to protect Rhaenyra. And so Jace argues, well, you have to obey me and you have to obey Rhaenyra, so you will keep Rhaenyra in this room to save her from going to the battle. And Rhaenyra says that she'll kill Laurent for disobeying her. So Laurent is in an impossible position. He's in a dilemma. Who does he obey, Queen Rhaenyra or Prince Jace? And ultimately, he decides to obey Jace, but I wonder if this will get Laurent killed. It's similar to the dilemmas that, Jaime Lannister goes through in the main series when he gets, orders from King Aerys to do evil things. George loves putting people in these moral dilemmas, asking what they should do with their power. Jace says, your life for hers. So Jace goes up to Baelor and says, hey, we will go to the war together, which seems just as foolish as Rhaenyra going. But Jace has got a bit of crazy eyes. Look at the crazy in Jace's eyes. It looks as though Jace might also have, that Targaryen fire. He also thinks he's destined to win. He's full of that confidence. This is your brain when you ride dragons. He thinks he's invulnerable, and so he and Baelor ride off to war. Even though Jace's dragon Vermax and Baelor's dragon Moondancer are some of the smaller, weaker dragons, so they're pretty vulnerable, and they're being very impulsive here. In the books, Baelor and Moondancer aren't in this battle. Moondancer is very young. Moondancer is still too small for Baelor to ride Moondancer. Baylor doesn't ride Moondancer yet at this point in the books, but they're changing this for the show. Remember that Baylor is betrothed to marry Jace. So, and, they seem to be one of the few couples who actually maybe like each other a little bit. They're one of the less dysfunctional relationships in this story, so it makes it extra sad when Jace dies in front of his betrothed, Baylor. So Rhaenyra is extremely frustrated that she's locked in her room. She's disobeyed by her son Jace and her Queensguard Laurent. And there's something very sad about, the Dragon Lord, Queen Rhaenyra, being stopped by a simple door trapped in her bedroom. So she's extremely frustrated, and her advisor Mazaria looks on with concern as Rhaenyra rips up her clothes in frustration. She stabs her riding leathers. She has an absolute tantrum. It looks like she's also punching the door because she picks at her knuckles. Her knuckles are all bloody. So she's really gone to town on this door. She's incredibly frustrated, feeling impotent. And she must be terrified that Jace might die if she knows that Jace is going to battle. And Rhaenyra tearfully says, "I may appear to have the weak and feeble body of a woman, but I possess the heart and spirit of a king." So that's a very interesting line. It's kind of a thesis statement for the whole show, because this show is about Rhaenyra trying to be a strong leader in a sexist world that doesn't accept female leaders. This sexist world thinks that only men can be strong leaders. So in a weird way, Rhaenyra, in some sense, has to be a man, or to take on these male traits or these male values. These values, the strength that is perceived as being a male quality, that's what she must be in order to be a strong leader. It's kind of similar to Shariko Loha. Last season, Shariko's men called Shariko he, him last season. And the actor Abby Thorne was saying that the Triarchy see Shariko as being like a male because of her strong leadership. Cersei says similar things about how she wishes she was born a man. And so Rhaenyra, I think, is grappling with similar issues. She feels like she has to be male or take on traits that are seen as male in order to be accepted as a strong leader. And that goes all the way back to season 1, when Rhaenys was telling Rhaenyra that this realm would rather burn itself down than accept a woman as its ruler. And in season 1, there was those mummers, those playwrights who performed a play where they called Rhaenyra feeble, and the women were saying, "We will never accept Rhaenyra because she's a feeble woman." And so this is still haunting Rhaenyra all these seasons later. She feels like, Jace and her Queensguard and all her counselors and bloody Celtigar, Bartimus Celtigar, no one is accepting her leadership because of her gender. And so that's this key frustration and this fury and this issue for Rhaenyra that's been very central to the show for the entire series. So this is different from the books. In the books, Rhaenyra at this point is still overwhelmed with grief from the death of her son Luke, who was killed by Vhagar and Aemond. And at this point in the books, Jace is more of the leader. Jace and Corlys are the ones who are planning an attack on King's Landing until they find out about the Gullet. And at the Gullet, there's Jace on Vermax, and Hugh on Vermithor, and Ulf on Silverwing, and Adam on Seasmoke, and Nettles on Sheepstealer. Rhaenyra isn't at the Gullet. Baylor isn't at the Gullet in the books. So this is very different. They're changing the focus onto the other characters. So we also get to see Corlys and Alan. There's a brief scene where we get to see the figurehead at the front of Corlys's ship. He's got a new figurehead, which is in the shape of his wife, Rhaenys. I think it's kind of amusing that he's got quite buxom looking shapes on his wife Rhaenys here on the figurehead. But he's renamed his ship from the Sea Snake to the Queen Who Never Was. So he's trying to honor his dead wife and make it about her instead of making it about himself. Because Corlys's whole arc this series has been about how he's this incredibly proud, accomplished man. He's the richest man in the kingdoms. He's sailed all over the world. He has it all, but he's trying to get more. He's trying to put a Velaryon on the throne. And his ambitions are his undoing, because his daughter Lena dies in Pentos, and his son Laenor seemingly dies, and his supposed grandson Luke dies, who was going to be his heir, and everything's blowing up for him. And so what he's doing now is, and his wife Rhaenys dies, and so now he's trying to acknowledge his sons Alan and Adam. Corlys wasn't there for Alan and Adam. They weren't acknowledged. And so they are really angry with him, or Alan in particular is really angry with him. So in this scene, we get Corlys apologizing and kind of saying that, like, yeah, it's my bad that I didn't support you better. And Alan says that he wants a name. And so, like, Corlys has a few different options here. Like, one option is that Corlys might acknowledge Alan. Corlys could acknowledge Alan, and then he might have the name Waters, the bastard name Waters. Another option might be if Corlys got Alan legitimized. So like a queen or a king can legitimize a bastard, so they become... Alan could become a Velaryon instead of a Waters. It's like how in Game of Thrones, King Stannis offers to legitimize Jon Snow, so Jon Snow would become Jon Stark. So there are lots of different options. And I mean, Alan might also be thinking about who his heir should be, because now that Jace dies at the Gullet, that means that Joffrey is now Rhaenyra's heir. Joffrey is now heir to the throne, the youngest son of Rhaenyra and Harwin. And if Joffrey is the heir to the throne, then who's going to be the heir to Driftmark? Joffrey can't be the heir to Driftmark anymore. So I think Corlys is trying to figure out who his heir might be. So I feel like this scene between Alan and Corlys is a continuation of the scenes that we got in Season 2. It's been a very, like, slow arc where we've gotten a lot of scenes with these two where they've kind of said the same thing. Where Alan is like, hey, like, I'm pissed off that you didn't, that you weren't there for me. And Corlys is uncomfortable and apologetic and struggles to express his feelings. Corlys mentions that he was fond of Alan's mother, who in the books is named Merilda, and that just is upsetting to Alan to hear that. But Alan really proves himself in this battle, because Alan kills Sharako, and I think it's a really beautiful moment in this battle when Alan yells, "Father." It's the first time that Alan has called Corlys his father. And so I think that these two men are very, very slowly developing a closer relationship as father and son. So I sure hope Corlys survived this episode. Corlys fell into the sea in, like, full plate armor. So I hope that Corlys survives and gets to be closer to Alan. Adam, the other bastard son, meanwhile, is flying around on a dragon. And Corlys, no doubt, is proud of that, although they have quite a distant relationship as well. Man, being a parent is hard. I think that's like the thesis statement of this show is, oh boy, it's tough to be a parent, especially when your kids ride dragons and especially when your kids marry each other. Boy howdy, does that make things weird. All right. And remember last season, Corlys said to Baelor, his granddaughter Baelor, that Baelor should be the heir to Driftmark. And Baelor said, no, I can't be the heir to Driftmark because I'm a Targaryen. I am blood and fire. Driftmark must go to Salt and Sea. And Alan is Salt and Sea. Alan is a sailor. Alan never wanted a dragon. So I think I think clearly the show is setting up for Corlys to think about who his heir should be and whether Alan or Adam might be his heir. Alan and Adam are different in the books. In the books, Alan and Adam are like 16 years old, and they both try to claim dragons, and their personalities seem pretty similar, like they're both bold and brave young boys. Whereas in the show, Alan and Adam are both older, and they have a more distinct personality, with Alan being a bit more humble and angry, and Adam being a bit more ambitious. Alright, so Alan makes a comment about Aemond, saying that Aemond would rather burn the city of King's Landing rather than surrender it, and that makes me think of the Mad King, Daenerys' father Aerys, who tried to burn King's Landing rather than surrender it. There's also a bit where Corlys shares a drink with Alan, and it's a very special vintage from Ib. Ib is an obscure, distant island in the far north, inhabited by these sort of Icelandic type people who like to do a lot of whaling. Except the Ibanese are also possibly Neanderthals. They're possibly like a distinct species of humans that exist in the world of Game of Thrones. The Ibanese are occasionally mentioned as turning up at ports and things. So I always enjoy when some of this obscure book lore is mentioned in the TV show. All right. So Alan and Corlys are in the Velaryon fleet in the Gullet near Driftmark and Dragonstone, and they get attacked by the pirates. The Triarchy are here, led by Sharako Lohar. So last season we saw Tyland Lannister meet with Sharako Lohar, and Sharako agreed to help the Greens attack the Velaryons and take the throne for Rhaegon, but only after some extensive mud wrestling and after Tyland promised to have sex with Sharako's wives. It is not yet revealed how many wives Sharako has and how many of them Tyland had sex with, but he sure is looking a bit more confident and full of himself right now, isn't he? I really like this quiet little arc of Tyland starting out as this sort of browbeaten messenger in Season 1, and gradually becoming a bit more self-important and confident, becoming a bit more like his twin Jason, perhaps. Until in this episode he rides into battle with the pirates, which is a far cry from what he was like early on. I wonder if Tyland will find out about the death of his twin brother Jason. I wonder when that will happen. So Sharako is the leader, and she's riding into battle, and she's pretty chill about it all. Tyland suggests that they should stick close to the enemy fleet to be relatively safe from their dragons, but Sharako is like, no, I've got a different plan. We're going to chase after the sea snake specifically, and they're going to go through this particular pass that Corlys leads them through. And Sharako eventually reveals that she doesn't care about Tyland's war. She doesn't care about the Greens. She just wants revenge on Corlys. There's a line where Sharako says that Corlys led the persecution of my mates for more than 20 years. It's interesting, like back in Season 2, Episode 8, Sharako also alluded to like history between Sharako and Corlys, because we know that there have been years and years and years of war between Westeros and the Triarchy, and we saw a little bit of that in Season 1, Episode 3. But there's more history here that we didn't see. And it seems as though Sharako and Corlys have met before and have fought before. And, you know, the Westerosi see the Triarchy as the bad guys. But from the Triarchy's perspective and Sharako's perspective, it was the Westerosi who were the villains who were attacking them. And Sharako wants to get revenge on Corlys for the war. It's interesting saying, you know, leading the persecution of my mates. It's hard to see the Triarchy having the moral high ground here. I mean, yes, they took the Stepstones, which is those islands between Westeros and Essos. And Westeros never claimed the Stepstones, really. So maybe it's fair game for the Triarchy to grab the Stepstones. And maybe it's fair game for the Triarchy to impose taxes on the ships that come through. But the Triarchy did more than that. Like, the crab feeder was nailing innocent sailors to the beach to be devoured alive by crabs. The Triarchy also kidnapped innocent children and sold them into sex slavery. That was mentioned in Season 1 as well. So I don't think the Triarchy are the good guys here, but Sharako, from her perspective, is trying to get revenge on Corlys, who she sees as her great rival. Sharako says that she will eat Corlys's ears, which I think is delightful. Sharako is still very kooky, even though she's a lot more serious in this episode. And Sharako's plan is specifically to burn High Tide. High Tide is the castle, the new castle built by Corlys. And Corlys talked previously about how he built High Tide by the strength of his own back. He made all of this money overseas on his travels, his great voyages, and he brought it back to build this wondrous castle full of all these treasures that we saw in Season 1. So he's really proud of High Tide. And so it's very perceptive of Sharako to realize that she can attack High Tide, and that hits Corlys where it hurts. And Corlys is devastated when he sees High Tide burning. In the books, Shariko goes further. In the books, the Triarchy brutally attack Driftmark and they kill heaps of civilians. The books describe how horrific the violence is on Driftmark caused by the Triarchy. So they go even further in the books. Shariko's ship is called the Bitch Fist. There are fists on the Triarchy's sails. I guess that's Shariko's personal symbol. And Shariko mentions that one of her sailors is named Halfjaw, which reminds me of the Ironborn sailor Dagmar Cleftjaw in the main series. It also reminds me of an alien in Halo 2 named Halfjaw. I wonder if that's a coincidence. Halfjaw. Shout out to all my Sangheli fans in the chat. So, the battle begins. The Triarchy ships attack the Velaryon fleet. The Triarchy outnumber the Velarions, and it quickly becomes carnage. And Corlys perceptively understands that Shariko is going after him specifically, so Corlys deliberately gets spotted by the Bitch Fist and then leads Shariko through this dangerous pass, where Corlys uses his sailing expertise to survive the narrow pass, hoping that Shariko will flounder. So I like seeing Corlys using like a clever naval strategy. Because Corlys is, above all, a sailor. And so I like seeing him actually do some cool sailing this episode. It surprises me that Corlys wears heavy armor on a ship, because, you'd think that a great sailor like Corlys would not want to drown in armor like Shariko, but that's what he does. And then Jace and Baylor arrive on their dragons Vermax and Moondancer. They start burning Triarchy ships. And so in the books, all those other dragon riders are here too, and here's how it's described. The line of warships shattered as one galley after another turned away. The dragons fell like thunderbolts, spitting balls of fire, blue and orange, red and gold, each brighter than the next. Ship after ship burst asunder or was consumed by flames. Screaming men leapt into the sea, shrouded in fire. Tall columns of black smoke rose up from the water. All was lost. So in the books, dragons have different colored flames. Some dragons have blue flame, or orange flame, or red or golden flame, which is a fun fantasy magical element in the books that none of the shows include. But it's a real, Technicolor Armageddon in the books. In the show, the Triarchy is shooting grapnels at the dragons to try and hook the dragons and weigh them down, which is a clever strategy. Like the books talk about, the Triarchy has fought dragons before. The Triarchy fought Caraxes on the Stepstones. We saw that in Season 1. And so the Triarchy are very brave to be facing dragons, and they've thought of some strategies to try and deal with them, like these grapnels. The grapnels remind me uncomfortably of Game of Thrones Season 8. Remember when, Euron Greyjoy was shooting those, scorpion ballistae at the dragons? This looks a little bit similar. Shariko hooks Vermax once and almost kills Vermax, but Vermax gets saved by Baylor and Moondancer. And then a second time, Jace and Vermax are hit, and then they die. So Corlys goes through the narrow pass. The narrow pass is called the Teeth, and I think that's an appropriate name because these waters are called the Gullet, like a mouth. So Teeth makes sense. Shariko follows Corlys through the narrow pass, and surprisingly she survives. She follows Corlys's expert sailing. And Shariko betrays Tyland, pushing him into the water. I really thought that Shariko genuinely had a big crush on Tyland, but nonetheless, Shariko pushes Tyland into the water. I hope he survives, but we'll see what happens. So the Bitch Fist catches up with the Queen Who Never Was and rams the ship, and we get this big dramatic fight with the two ships crashing together. Apparently there's a lot of practical effects. This was a really ambitious production. Where they actually built these physical ships, and they actually had them in big tanks of water. And so all these stunts and effects are apparently mostly practical, which is pretty cool. I'm also extremely impressed seeing Steve Toussaint playing Corlys Velaryon, doing all this fighting and leaping across the deck. Because Steve Toussaint is 61 years old, so I think it's pretty badass to be doing these stunts at his age. All the fighting stuff is pretty cool. I'm impressed by the production value here. I think it's really neat that Corlys has an arak at one point. The arak is the curved blade used by the Dothraki. It looks like he picks it up during the battle. And I think it makes sense that Corlys knows how to use an arak because Corlys has famously sailed all over the world. I think Corlys has picked up different skills in the places he's gone. So it makes sense that he has, like, you know, familiarity with all these different kinds of weapons. I think that's fun. So Shariko fights Corlys, and then Corlys falls into the water. Maybe he will die, we don't know. And then there's a fight between Alan and Shariko in the water, and it's brutal and desperate, and Alan ultimately kills the pirate Shariko Lohar. And Shariko seems surprised to die in the end, and she sinks into the water. Burial at sea. So Rhaena joins the battle. So at first, Rhaena approaches Dragonstone, and she's so relieved to be home, because Rhaena has been, like, you know, living in the hills of the Vale for a while, and it was a pretty long flight from the Vale to the Gullet, I would think. So, you know, she could really use a shower, but she sees that there's a battle happening, and she wants to help her family. So Rhaena flies in, and she starts burning Triarchy ships, but unfortunately, Sheepstealer is a wild animal, and Sheepstealer doesn't know how to read heraldry, so Sheepstealer starts burning some of the Velaryon ships as well, burning some of Rhaena's own side, and Sheepstealer even attacks Baela and Moondancer. I love the line when Rhaena says, "That's my sister." Rhaena is horrified that her new dragon is attacking her own side. And so Jace and Baela have to dodge Sheepstealer at the same time as fighting the Triarchy, and ultimately Jace and Vermax get killed. I wonder if Rhaena will blame herself for the death of Jace and Vermax. So Vermax gets hooked by one of the grapnels and sinks into the water, and Jace has to unhook himself from his dragon, which is really sad, and the dragon drowns, and Jace is killed by arrows. Somehow the death of Vermax is, like, the saddest part to me. I mean, it reminds me of the death of Viserion in Game of Thrones Season 7, seeing the dragon sink into the water. It's so sad because the dragon is innocent in all this. The dragon didn't start the war. It's always sad to see the dragons die. And yeah, Jace dies. Rhaenyra's son and heir is dead. I feel like this would have worked better if it was the climax of Season 2. Originally, Season 2 was meant to be 10 episodes, but it was changed to 8. And I think that the death of Jace would have hit harder if it happened at the end of Season 2, because Season 2 put a lot of effort into building up Jace and his relationship with Rhaenyra and his relationship with Baela. There were some good scenes with Jace and Baela in Season 2. So I think, like, the structure and the pacing is unfortunate here. But I think that the death of Jace is done well. So that was the Gullet. It's quite different to the books. So, like, Sheepstealer and Rhaena aren't here in the books. Hugh and Ulf and Adam are here in the books. And there's this whole other thing that happens with Aegon and Viserys. So remember that Rhaenyra and Daemon have these young sons, Aegon and Viserys, and they are sent to Pentos on a ship for their safety. But in the books, the Triarchy coincidentally bumps into Aegon and Viserys in their ship and captures them. And Aegon escapes the Triarchy on his dragon Stormcloud and comes to Dragonstone and says what happens, and his dragon Stormcloud dies of wounds, and that's how this battle starts in the books. And Aegon feels guilty that Aegon ran off and left his brother Viserys behind. Aegon is like 9 years old in the books, and Viserys is like 7 or 8 or something. So Aegon and Viserys are actual characters who are doing stuff in the books, but it looks like they've decided not to include that in the show. And instead they're focusing on Rhaena, Baela, and Jace. And as I said, the sack of Driftmark is much more brutal in the books. Maybe we'll see a bit more of the aftermath on Driftmark in later episodes. But, you know, this is part of why House Velaryon isn't as relevant in the main Game of Thrones series. House Velaryon is really badly damaged by what the Triarchy do to them. So this has, like, historical impact, what we're seeing here. Shariko's motivations are a bit different in the books. In the books, it notes that when Shariko returns, Shariko survives in the books, and when Shariko and the Triarchy return from this battle, almost all of the surviving ships are from Lys. So remember that the Triarchy is an alliance of the eastern cities of Mir, Tyrosh, and Lys. And so it's really sus that all of the Mirish and Tyroshi ships are sunk, but the Lysine ships survive. It looks as though Shariko was deliberately using the Battle of the Gullet to wipe out Shariko's political rivals. And this ultimately leads to the downfall of Shariko later on in the books. So there's this whole, like, eastern political thing that's hinted at in the books, whereas in the show they're telling a story more about Shariko getting revenge on Corlys, which, you know, I think is a good choice, because I think that obscure Eastern politics is less interesting of a story than a personal rivalry between Shariko and Corlys, in my opinion. But yeah, the whole Rhaena Nettles change is huge. So it seems as though they're going way off the book plots with Rhaena, and so I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with Rhaena. It'll be interesting. I wonder if Rhaena will blame herself for Jace's death. I wonder if Rhaenyra will blame Rhaena for Jace's death. I wonder how Daemon will feel about Rhaena. It's all very interesting. All right, so I'm going to respond to your questions and donations in the super chats. And I also want to let you know that you can sign up to Nebula to get a whole bunch of exclusive content. So in July, we're going to be covering the new Game of Thrones play, The Mad King, put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company. George Martin has made input into this play, and it looks like this play will reveal some of the oldest, biggest mysteries in the Game of Thrones books. It's about the Harrenhal tourney and Robert's Rebellion, some 17-ish years before Game of Thrones. So this is Rhaegar and Lyanna, this is Ashara Dane and Howland Reed, this is Brandon Stark and Barristan Selmy and Oberyn Martell having the party of all parties in Harrenhal right before Robert's Rebellion. So I'm really excited to see this play, and we're going to cover it first. To see our coverage first, you can sign up on Nebula. It'll be nebula.tv/AltShiftX or nebula.tv/AltSwiftX, links below. And it's going to be a good time. We also have the 22-hour-long video, The Fake Jon Snow, is exclusive on Nebula, and there's Dragon Time videos about every episode of House of the Dragon. AltShiftX and Glidus are covering each episode this season, and Dragon Time comes out right after the episode airs on Nebula. So it's a good way to support the channels. We appreciate it if you sign up. Nebula has exclusive videos from lots of other great creators like Tom Scott and Lindsay Ellis. It's an independent creator-owned site, and it helps support this channel. Sign up and you get 50% off an annual subscription, making the price just $30 for a year. Thanks. All right, let's respond to some of your questions. So, Henry says sheep stealer is a sheep feeder. Yeah. Do you think that sheep stealer only eats sheep, or do you? I really liked the detail that Daemon said that Caraxes prefers pork in season 2. I want to know all of the favorite foods of all of these dragons. C. Katrin says, love scheming Alicent, but at what cost? Yeah. I think that, like, there's a logic to Alicent trying to do what she can do to help in the war and to save her family. That makes sense. She's been pushed out of having direct authority, so now she's forced to be indirect. And I like the rising sense of desperation and fear, and just the sense of helplessness at this conflict that she helped create. I think there's a lot of irony and tragedy to Alicent's story here. I just hope that it makes sense. Because they're in a weird box where they're trying to focus on Alicent, but they're also trying not to diverge from the books too much. So they are not having Alicent do anything impactful. But how can you tell an interesting story about a character who's not having much impact? It's a real pickle. It's a real storytelling adaptation challenge that they're in. But, you know, I love Olivia Cook's performance. If nothing else, I think that she's a wonderful actor. Thank you, Top Pleb, who says, let's see, once the season is done, if this episode should have been left in the last season. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, this episode, Season 3, Episode 1, it's really the 9th episode of Season 2. Because, reportedly, the Battle of the Gullet was originally going to be in Episodes 9 and 10 of Season 2. So, you know, maybe when people rewatch this show, maybe we will think of Season 3, Episode 1 and Season 3, Episode 2 of really being the ending to Season 2. It might make more sense like that, because there is a lot of setup in Season 2 that didn't pay off in Season 2. It pays off in Season 3. Thank you, Honey Badger, who says that Sheep Stealer has a Habsburg chin, just like Damon and Amond. Thank you, Malia, who says, Shiba dog raising an arm to greet someone, asking, how's it going? How's it going, Mailer? Thank you, Randomity, who says, did anyone catch Rhaenyra's Tilbury speech? I don't know what that is. Thank you, Rick Tater, who says that Rhaena and Baela are both useless, but at least Alan went off. It was fun seeing Alan fight so ferociously after seeing Corlys sink into the drink. It is interesting, I suppose, that Alan never really expressed his love for Corlys directly. Like, Alan has never really admitted, you know, that he wants Corlys's love and that he respects Corlys and thinks of Corlys as his father. Alan has never quite said that with words, but Alan says that with actions. When Corlys falls overboard, Alan kills Shariko. And so I think that's an expression of his frustration and his love for Corlys. And maybe now these men might be able to express their feelings with words. That's the hope. Thank you, George Matt, who says that everything I see so far on Reddit about the episode is very negative, which confuses me because I personally loved it, except the kiss, but that's fine. I think that social media algorithms don't reflect reality. I think that social media algorithms, including Reddit, are designed to bring up the opinions that are the most extreme and inflammatory and controversial. So I think that if you look at the internet, you might get an impression that everybody is angry all of the time. But I think that if you talk to people in the real world, people are usually a bit more chill. That's my feeling. Thank you, Airborne, who says, when the Winter Wolves arrive with the drums, it's a nice callback to Game of Thrones 1, where Bran describes Karstark drummers marching to Winterfell. Yeah, I like how they're doing the Winter Wolves, because there's a sense in the books that the Northmen are seen as these like foreign savages by some of the other kingdoms. Like, you know, the Reach Lords are like these fancy chivalrous knights with their full plate armor and all of their tournaments and their flowery banners. But the Northmen are these savages in skins who are roaring and beating their drums and sacrificing their enemies to trees. And, you know, you get a bit of that sense sometimes in the show, but we're seeing more of it here in House of the Dragon, and I enjoy seeing the difference between the grizzled Winter Wolves and the fancy pants Hightower army. I enjoy those like cultural differences that we're seeing, which are very, very present in the books. Thank you, Ryan Shumpert, who says, Alicent's talk to Aemond reminded me of the Tyrion line about Cersei. Making honest feelings do dishonest work is one of her many talents. I don't remember that line. Someone tell me in the comments what that line is from. I don't remember that line. But that certainly is the kind of manipulation that we see from the Lannisters, for sure. I think that the Greens in The Dance of the Dragons are similar to the Lannisters in a lot of ways. And, you know, there are parallels between Alicent and Cersei, for sure. And between Rhaenyra and Cersei. George has written many characters about women who desire power but come up against barriers from their society. And there are some delightfully messy, angry, dysfunctional, tragic characters that he's written along that theme. Apparently Streamlabs is broken. I will fix that later. Thank you, Sloppy Joe Nasty, who says, love the content. I think the battle was better in the books. It was more high stakes. Also, no Aegon and Viserys messes with the lore. So yeah, we talked about how Aegon and Viserys are the young blonde sons of Rhaenyra and Daemon. In the show, they were sent off to Pentos, and so I guess in the show we assumed that they made it to Pentos safely. And yeah, that may impact the later story. We'll have to see how that turns out in the show. I think that, look, this show is telling the story of the Dance of the Dragons. And it's focusing on the characters who are most relevant to that story. So I think what they're doing is not crazy, but we'll see how they handle the long game. Also, yeah, the battle was better in the books. I mean, I think that it's a good decision to focus the battle on character relationships. I think focusing it on like Corlys and Shariko's rivalry makes sense. I think focusing on like the death of Jace is tragic for Baela, his betrothed. That makes sense. Drama between like, Rhaenyra's dragon almost killing her sister Baela. That makes sense. Like, you want emotional stakes in a battle like this. And I think that emotional stakes are tricky when all of your actors are riding CGI dragons up in the sky. It's very difficult to have direct emotional connections and conversations when everyone's whizzing about in the air and not engaging directly. So I think focusing the characters differently makes sense to me. Like, I think it would be hard to keep track if there were 5 dragon riders at this battle. But I worry about what the hell Rhaenyra's storyline is going to be. So I have mixed feelings. I think that this was certainly a very cool action sequence. And I think that the death of Jace was very sad, and the death of Vermax was very sad. And I think the real question is, like, how is Rhaenyra going to react to this? How is Baela going to react to this? How is Rhaenyra going to react to this? I think that those are the big questions. Thank you, Alex, who says, good world building, bad changes from the books. Yeah, well, look, I like that they did the Green Men. I like that they did Alice and the Goat and all that weird stuff. I liked a lot of, the Winter Wolves and Roddy the Ruin. Like, a lot of that world building stuff has been done well. I think that some of these changes they make from the books, it makes for a better, more emotional episode in the moment. The question is, what are the impacts of these changes later in the story? And that's kind of what George Martin was saying in his blog posts. George Martin was saying that there are toxic butterflies. And when you make a change to Helena now or Rhaenyra now, maybe that's okay now, but the domino effects, the on-flow impacts of these changes are going to change things dramatically later on. And it'll be interesting to see how true that is. Gustavo says that the Green Man is a peeping Tom. Not sure why the Goat was watching Ulf poop. That's a good question. Thank you, Buddy, who says, 1. Anyone have weird focus stuff during the episode? Rhaenyra being Nettles is messing with the show. Not that happy with the direction of the show. Thank you, Jess, who says that's something we'll talk about a little later. Thank you, Fox, who says this is not an improvement on what we were seeing before. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes joke. More Duncan Egg, please. Well, they are making more Duncan Egg. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms Season 2 is being filmed now, and it, in theory, will come out in 2027. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms Season 3 has not yet been greenlit officially, but it sounds as though that might also happen. And Night of the Seven Kingdoms showrunner Ira Parker is saying that he wants to make 10 more seasons, and I hope that he does. We made a video recently called The Future of Dunk and Egg, which talks about all the things that might happen in Dunk and Egg's future. Thank you, Ray Day, who says, so glad that you and Hot D are back. I'm also happy that your bastard brother Swift Snow and Lord Glidus are back with Dragon Time. Yeah, Dragon Time is fun and silly and a bit more opinionated than Alt Shift X, and you can watch Dragon Time Season 3 Episode 1 now at the link below. Thank you, Jess K, who says that I feel like A Night of the Seven Kingdoms spoiled me because this episode felt inferior compared to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Yeah, I mean, it's very different, isn't it? I think that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms was so well grounded in Peter Claffey and Dexter Sol Ansel. The main characters were just vibing so well. It was a very charming show. Whereas this is a show that I think is creaking under its own weight sometimes. There's a lot of characters, and it's very difficult to pace and structure it. So it's maybe less elegant than A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms sometimes. I also enjoy the scope of it, though, and I enjoy the performances. I think if nothing else, House of the Dragon has some incredibly good acting performances, and the production value is extremely high. However, I agree that some of these, like, Alicent plots and Rhaenyra plots are frustrating for me, and I'm worried about what on earth is happening with Rhaena. Thank you, Jose, who says, excited to hear you're going to the Mad King play. Looking forward to your insights. Can't wait for your Del Toro Quest deep dive for your next April Fool's video. Don't tempt me. Wouldn't that be fun to just do an hour-long Del Toro Quest explained video? Well, look, I've got some plans, and there are some video topics you don't expect coming your way. Thank you, Gerald, who says, I don't think Daemon will be too bummed about Jace. Just one more strong boy to go, and his pure Valyrian boys will be next in line for the throne. Yeah, the relationship between Daemon and Jace was interesting. We only really got one scene between them, when Daemon was, like, intimidating their Queensguard with his dragon Caraxes, and he was trying to, like, teach Jace to be brutal. But yeah, we didn't see a lot of fondness between Daemon and Jace. Maybe Daemon would prefer that his own sons survive and inherit the throne from Rhaenyra. So that's a good question. Daemon has done worse things. Thank you for the donation from Mason, who says, interesting that they kept Daeron out of focus in that scene. Yeah, I do not know if that character was Prince Daeron Targaryen or not. That kid with Ormond, I think, based on unofficial reports, I think that is the actor who plays Daeron Targaryen on screen now. But if that's Prince Daeron, it's very weird that they didn't introduce him as Prince Daeron. So maybe that really is just some random servant. I mean, the hair color is the same hair color as Alicent, so maybe that is meant to be Alicent's son, Daeron. I don't think the hair color of Daeron is explicitly said in the books. I don't know if Daeron Targaryen is meant to be silver Targaryen hair or not. But, so, yeah, it's a mystery. I'm very curious what's going on with Daeron. Thank you, Rayday, who says R.I.P. to Jace, Vermax, and the Murder Kitties. Thank you, Jess K, who says, it's a shame we may not get Sabbatha or Forrest because of how they did this era of the phrase dirty. Yeah, so Sabbatha Frey is a cool lady of the twins in this period in the books. And remember the Freys last season demanded Harrenhal. They agreed to support Rhaenyra only if Rhaenyra would give them Harrenhal. And Sabbatha is a cool, badass woman who is like maybe a friend or more than a friend of Black Aly Blackwood. So like, yeah, there is some interesting Frey stuff going on in the books in this period. And it doesn't look as though they're including it in the show. Because, you know, we did see a Lady Frey last season, but she didn't look like Sabbatha Frey. I suspect that they're not doing that plotline. But yeah, it is a shame. Look, I mean, the thing about this book is that there's a million, like, obscure side characters who are, like, mentioned in, like, a few sentences in the book. And the book's like, oh, this character went and did this cool thing. And you're like, neat. And I think the TV show needs to be like, okay, like, which ones do we include? Because the TV show can't include every single obscure little side character, because then each season would be 40 hours long and would have 500 characters. So I think they've got to pick and choose. You know, like Oscar Tully, for example, seems to be a combination of a bunch of different characters, like the lads and Benjicott Blackwood and all them seem to be rolled into Oscar Tully. And I think like combining characters like that makes some sense. But I'm also happy that they've included some fan favorite characters like Black Aly Blackwood and Roddy the Ruin. But we can't have them all. So yeah, there are always going to be some disappointments. I would like to see Sabbatha Frey, maybe we will get Sabbatha Frey. Thank you, Tony Manic, who says, Tipsy theories. Balerion died of cringe after flying Prince V because he saw him as an omen of the dance. The Starks this episode will sew the lion's head onto Tylan's body, foreshadowing the Red Wedding. Okay, so Balerion was the biggest dragon in the world, the Black Dread. And Balerion was ridden by Viserys Targaryen, Paddy Considine. But Balerion was not Viserys' dragon for long, because Balerion died of old age, and Viserys never had another dragon. There's a really nice piece of artwork of Balerion and Viserys that I can't find. But it's Balerion's skull that we see in the Red Keep as well, which is cool. So yeah, it's one of those really like interesting details of Viserys' character that that he had the most powerful dragon in the world, but then Viserys is saying, oh, we should never have had dragons. Viserys is saying that, yeah, dragons are a power that can't be controlled and we should never have trifled with them. So I wonder what Viserys' experience with Balerion was. Like, it sounds like maybe he had a bad experience. Yeah, here's the artwork. Isn't this beautiful goddamn artwork? This is Viserys. This is Paddy Considine with the death of Balerion. The greatest dragon in the world died. And I wonder what impact that had on Viserys. And I wonder if his experience with Balerion scared him. I wonder if Viserys felt that he couldn't control Balerion. And maybe that's why Viserys says that dragons can't be controlled. There's also conspiracy theories, like maybe the Maesters poisoned Balerion is a theory, because it seems that the Maesters wanted the dragons dead. So yeah, it's this whole interesting thing. So I think Tony in the super chat is saying that Balerion died of cringe, because yeah, Viserys caused this war in a lot of ways because he, named Rhaenyra his heir, but didn't do enough to support her politically, and this war is causing the deaths of dragons and the deaths of Targaryens, and so it's all been downhill since Balerion died. So in the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, Robb has his direwolf's head sewn onto his body. So we see that in Season 3, Episode 10. And our Super Chatter is suggesting maybe they'll do the same thing to Tyland. Maybe they will sew Tyland's head onto a lion's body. Or they'll sew a lion's head... Sorry, on Jason. Maybe they'll sew a lion's head on Jason's body, like this moment in the Red Wedding. That would be pretty messed up, but yeah, maybe they will do it. I mean, it's funny because the Starks seem to have a genuine mystical connection with the direwolves. Like, many Starks have been skin changers who can control their wolves and see through the eyes of their wolves. So there's a real mysticism there. The Lannister sigil is the lion, but it seems that the Lannisters don't have a magical connection with the lions. In the books, they mention that there are lions kept in cages in Casterly Rock, and Jaime and Cersei would, tease these lions and look at these lions in the cages, but there isn't some magic there. The dragons have a mystic connection with the Targaryens have a mystic connection with their dragons, but there is not such a connection with the Lannister lions. Thank you, Ariel, who says, Hi, Schwaltzing Glatilda. Season of Rapid Fire Heavy? Sure. Thank you, Skilled Warman, who says, Did you ever see the interview Condell did with Entertainment Weekly in 2024, where he said Maelor does not exist yet? Could be tied to the birth in the trailer. Yeah, so in the books, Helena has a son named Maelor. And Maelor is a part of the Blood and Cheese incident in Season 2, where Jaehaerys is killed. But in the show, Maelor is not there, and Maelor does not seem to be born yet. And I believe in the past, Ryan Condell, the showrunner, said that, yeah, Maelor does exist. We haven't seen him on screen, but Maelor does exist. But that seemed to change in Season 2, in which Maelor does not exist. And then George Martin posted on his blog that he's angry that Maelor doesn't exist, and that'll change things later on. But now there's a shot in the trailers that looks like maybe Helena is giving birth to Maelor. So it's a confusing situation. Maelor was in the family tree in the opening credits as well, wasn't he? Yeah, Maelor. Look, these are the three children in the season 1 opening sequence: Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor. So this indicates that Maelor did exist in season 1, but then Maelor isn't present in the blood and cheese scene in season 2. So it seems as though the showrunners have changed their mind about whether Maelor exists. It would be a very funny thing if they decided to add Maelor now, of all times. But that would be a weird thing to do. But maybe they will, because what else are they going to do with Helena this season? It's a real mystery. Thank you, Plural, who says, "Wow, what an episode, Alt Shift. Thank you for your video uploads. Are you okay with this recent change regarding Nettles? Also, we saw a green man again." Thank you for asking if I'm okay. I am okay. I think that the Rhaena storyline might get weird. I'm not sure. But because I do like the Nettles storyline in the books. In the books, the Nettles storyline is very mysterious and strange, and I think it is a loss to cut Nettles from the show, but I can't judge it until I see what they do, so I'm eagerly awaiting. And yes, I'm thrilled we got to see a green man. H. Fabian says, "Aemond, you are quite disgusting." Aemond is a very confused and angry and violent man, isn't he? Thank you, Jess, who says, "Alice is great at ambushing men when they're in the wrong genre in this show." You ever see, like, the Zach Kreger movies, Barbarian and Weapons? Barbarian and Weapons are such funny movies because they have characters walk into a haunted house, they walk into a horror movie, and they don't know that they're in a horror movie. And it's always hilarious and surprising how that happens. Just watch those movies. There's similar moments in this when, like, Hugh and Ulf and Adam, they think that they're, in a war camp waiting to ambush a dragon. But then, like, a magic goat and a green man and a witch just leap out of a bush while they're pooping. And it's like, huh? I didn't know I was in a weird fantasy horror movie, but that's what's happening. It's like all the stuff with Damon where he's like, "Oh no, my Airbnb is a haunted mansion. I was not expecting this." You're so right. Yeah, they're in the wrong genre in this show. Jonathan says, "Aemond kissing his mummy. Yuck." Mistman says, "Do you think it's possible Tyland survived the battle and was captured? I hope so." I mean, you know that Tyland and Jason Lannister are both played by the same actor, Jefferson Hall, who also played Sir Hugh in Game of Thrones Season 1. So Jefferson Hall has the rare honor of being the first actor to play 3 different characters in Westeros shows. And so, yeah, I do hope that Tyland is alive. Bane's Basement says, "Harry's so good, bummed that they nerfed his death." How did they nerf his death? They changed the battle. I thought that his death was sad. Thank you, Jess, who says, "I think different forms of magic in this universe rarely mix well, with the sole exception, it seems, of Arya's faceless men magic and Old Gods magic." Yeah, there are a lot of different flavors of magic in this world. There's like the magic of the Red God, R'hllor, who seems to be the force that resurrects Beric Dondarrion and animates Melisandre, and does all of that magic. And then there's the Old Gods, the magic of Bloodraven and Bran Stark, who can see through time and control animals. And then there's, like, dragon magic, perhaps, which is what gives the Targaryens their visions of the future, it seems. The Faith of the Seven seem to have no magic, as far as anyone can tell. And then you've got, the Faceless Men's magic, which might be a kind of blood magic, which they use to change their appearance. And yeah, it usually seems that most characters are, affiliated with one flavor. They tend not to use multiple different flavors of magic. But, I mean, it's all very mysterious. It might be that magic is just one thing, but people project their own beliefs onto it, Maybe people think that R'hllor resurrected Beric just because Beric believes in R'hllor, but maybe it was some other god. I think that George Martin has said that, the gods are not going to appear on screen. Magic is a force that exists here, but it's not like the gods are necessarily characters who want things in this particular show. I think the old gods, they are nature. They are the power of nature and the memory of nature. And the children of the forest represent, something primal that predates human civilization. And I think that they're a cool force for that reason. Thank you, Plural Board, who says, even if people say this wasn't in the book, we can remember that Fire and Blood was also from the perspective of another source. Sometimes we can't make everyone happy, even in Game of Thrones season 5 to 8, right? Yeah, so Fire and Blood is the main book that this show is based on, and Fire and Blood is a weird, experimental, fictional history book. It tells the story of this war from lots of different perspectives, and it says that, Grand Maester Orwyle says that this happened, and Septon Eustace says that this other thing happened, and the Jester Mushroom says that this other thing happened, and no one knows what the truth is. For example, the death of Lyman Beesbury. Some people say that Lyman Beesbury was thrown out a window. Some people say that Kristen cut Lyman Beesbury's neck. Some people say that Lyman was just imprisoned and he died of a cold in the dungeon. And so this show from the beginning has always had to choose what version of reality happened. And sometimes it picks one of the options from the book, and sometimes it creates its own different interpretation. And certainly the book has to choose which characters to focus on. It has to invent most of the dialogue and most of the characterization, because the book doesn't have much detail, doesn't have much dialogue. So I think that it's a very interesting challenge to adapt. And I think that they've made some really good choices and creative choices, and I think other choices have worked less well. Thank you, Rafe Watts, who says that, do you think that Corlys's Dothraki Arak could maybe be the Valyrian steel Arak that Euron gives to the Ironborn at the Kingsmoot? Yeah, the main books do mention a Valyrian steel Arak, which sounds very cool and rare and special. I think that the Arak that Corlys had in this battle, I think that he picked it up during the battle. I don't think he had it before. But yeah, hell, maybe it is Valyrian steel. It would be cool to have a little history behind that weapon. We did make a video a long time ago about all the different Valyrian steel weapons on Alt Shift X, so you can look that up if you're interested. Thank you, Nuke, who says, started off as a fan of the show, now can't stand it. Did we have to do more freaking incest? Even less Rhaenyra agency? I look forward to the shift analysis more than the actual show. Yeah, I did feel like it was comical when Rhaenyra was literally locked in her room for this episode. Because, a common complaint with last season was that Rhaenyra spent most of last season standing around going, what would you have me do? I want to do things, but I can't do things. Oh no, what shall I do? And, Corlys spent the whole season at the dock, and Daemon was tripping in Harrenhal, and there was a lot of, stuff not happening in Season 2. So I share your frustration, and I think it was a bit ridiculous having Rhaenyra locked in her room. And I think that it's a consequence of their decision to focus the story on Rhaenyra and Alicent, when Rhaenyra and Alicent sometimes don't have much to do at this point in the story. Thank you, Santiago, who says, hello Shift, happy to see the community meeting up again on Sundays. I've been reading Fire and Blood for the first time, and I got to the part where Arya Targaryen dies, and for the love of the mother, what the fuck was that? 7 hells. Yeah, there's a very scary moment in Fire and Blood, decades and decades before this part of the story, where a Targaryen princess flies off on Balerion and apparently goes to Valyria. And in Valyria, some bad stuff happens. And Balerion, the biggest organism in the world, comes back with a big wound on his belly. And Arya dies, burned up from the inside, consumed by fireworms with human faces or something. It's this horrific horror scene in the history book, and no one knows exactly what it means. But one theory is that in Valyria there are still dragons, big dragons bigger and more ancient than Balerion, perhaps, who wounded Balerion. There are also theories that fireworms with human faces are maybe the result of weird chimera interspecies breeding experiments done by the Valyrians between humans and fireworms. There are hints of that in the books. Valyria was a bad place, and there are still monsters there, it seems. And I think this is yet another hint of the evil that is at the heart of the ancestral roots of the Targaryens. It's all a bit Lovecraftian. Like, George Martin has talked about how H.P. Lovecraft was a big influence on this story. And H.P. Lovecraft often writes about terrible discoveries in one's ancestry, finding out that, oh no, there are monsters in my past, there is evil in my blood. And I think the Targaryens' ancestors did evil things. I think that the ancient Valyrians and Azor Ahai may have been evil and did bad things, and the connection to the dragons is part of that. I think that it is not a good thing for humans to be psychically bound to engines of destruction and fire. So I think that that's part of what's going on with the Arya story. Thank you, Quasmoke, who says, make more videos, you're the best. Menage says, update your Streamlabs. Thank you, I will do that. Grand Pop says that Tywin Lannister was last seen adrift. Thank you, Joseph, who says, if you want another Ivanhoe-like recommendation, I recommend The Lion in Winter, Henry II. His family make the Lannisters seem chill. Yeah, Ivanhoe is a book and a movie by Sir Walter Scott that was one of the main inspirations behind George Martin's Dunk and Egg books and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I do recommend watching Ivanhoe, it's fun. I would like to read more like historical fiction, because that's one of the other main inspirations behind Game of Thrones. Thank you, Arza, who says, Barred door was so frustrating. The second door in her room was a plot point in Eric versus Arik, and it was shown in the background in this episode. Felt lazy. Yeah, I do agree with that, actually, because, yeah, this is the second time in 2 seasons that Rhaenyra has been locked in her room to her frustration. Because, yeah, remember in Season 2, Episode 2, Arik of Aegon's Kingsguard came to Dragonstone and tried to kill Rhaenyra. And Arik had to specifically make sure that like both doors were barred and locked, like he stuck a key in one of the doors. And yeah, so you can see that there are 2 doors in Rhaenyra's room, but in this episode we only see Laurent blocking one of them. So like Rhaenyra's stuck in her room, why can't she leave out the other door? I mean, maybe Laurent locked the other door off screen. But I agree that if nothing else, the repetition is what's annoying. It is annoying that Rhaenyra has again been locked in her room and prevented from having any agency. And it's very difficult to tell a good story when your characters don't have agency. I was really hoping that this season there would be an end to all of these characters being, artificially stopped from acting through contrived plot reasons. But we are getting some more of it in this episode. I hope that changes. Thank you, Hamish, who says, would you rather be tickled by the tickler or get given the Ashford chair? Man, what a... yeah, those are 2 creative torture methods mentioned in this series. The tickler is the one who likes to chain a bucket of rats to your belly, I believe, so the rats eat you from the inside. Yeah, I'm going to choose neither of those. There are a lot of grisly torture methods mentioned in this series. Rick Tator says, can you expand on Alan's role in the books and what you think they're doing with him in the show? Is he being set up to be the next Lord of the Tides? Yeah, I mean, I think that it looks like that's what they're doing, with Alan saying, I want a name. Maybe Corlys will give Alan the name Velaryon. I think that is pretty obvious and makes some sense. I mean, Alan and Adam in the books are younger and more impetuous, and they're boys, and they're both bold and brave. And I think that it makes sense to change that because there are so many plucky, young, brave boys in this story. We've already got Jace, Luke, and Joff, and we've already got Aegon and Aemond and Daeron. I think it makes sense to give Alan and Adam more grown-up personalities and having these sort of more subtle, complex arcs about, resentment of their father and having ambition. I think my critique of Alan's plotline, though, is that it seems like it's going in slow motion. I feel like we've gotten basically the same scene between Alan and Corlys like 3 or 4 times now. And it is evolving, but it's evolving very slowly. And again, I think this might partly be a result of the change in season 2 from 10 to 9 episodes. I hope that we get some kind of progress and change and resolution with Alan's growth next season. But it's also a good question, like, what happens next? Because, like, if Alan, gets acknowledged by Corlys and maybe becomes heir to Driftmark, like, what happens next? Like, where does he go from there? I guess he's just going to be, like, a badass, cool, leader and sailor and captain. Like, I could see all that for him, but I wonder, like, where we go from there. I mean, maybe Alan will never fully accept Corlys. Maybe Alan will always be angry at Corlys. I think that would make a lot of sense. But I think that the performance is good. Like, Abubakar Salim is a good actor. I really liked him in Raised by Wolves as well, which was another HBO show. I think the performances are really good and they're subtle, but I think it's frustrating that they're so slow and they are not as dynamic and fun and interesting as some of the other performances, like, say, Matt Smith as Damon. Like, he's always very entertaining and dynamic and you never know what he's going to do next. Whereas Alan and Corlys have had almost the same scene and they're never surprising. I think I really loved Alan yelling "father" because that felt like an outburst. That felt like something real and spontaneous and emotional, and I loved Alan's intensity in fighting Shariko. So I hope we get to see a little bit more of that fire. Because even if Alan doesn't want to be a dragon rider, he probably still has Targaryen blood through his mother, because that's how Adam is a dragon rider. So seeing a little bit of fire from Alan is fun, even if his destiny is Salton Sea. Thank you, Benadryl, who says, Happy Father's Day to Big Daddy Alt-Shift-X. Thank you, Jess K, who says something for a spoiler chat. Thank you, Posh, who says, in your estimation, how would things have gone if Rhaenyra was the one at the battle? I think that Rhaenyra on Syrax... I mean, Rhaenyra is a more experienced dragon rider, and Syrax is a bigger, stronger dragon. Maybe since Syrax is bigger and stronger, it would have been harder for Syrax to be dragged underwater. Because, like, Shariko's Triarchy were, like, pulling Vermax underwater with, like, an anchor attached to a rope. Syrax is bigger and stronger. Maybe Syrax would have been able to carry the weight and would have been able to escape. So, yeah, maybe tragically... it's because Syrax didn't come and Vermax went instead. Maybe that's what caused Vermax's death. I mean, logically, you'd think that you'd be better off if you kept your dragon riders together. If Rhaenyra's stuck, like, if Rhaenyra and Jace and Baelor and Adam and Ulf and Hugh, if they all went together to the Triarchy like they do in the books, you'd think they'd be safer together. Like, nothing could stop them together. And, like, the biggest threat, the only threat to them really, is Vhagar. And the best way to handle Vhagar is with all of their dragons together. Like, Vhagar, like, individually, Vhagar can probably kill any of their dragons individually. So their best hope is to stick together. That's what I would think. If I was in charge of these dragons, I'd keep them together. But that's what happened. Thank you, Cherry Slushy, who says, first time catching a live, just wanted to say that I love the content and appreciate you and Glimby. Thanks so much, Cherry. Glad you enjoy. Thank you, VolantredX, who says, Rhaenyra's story is going to replace Nettles, and Rhaenyra will go full crazy. We'll talk about that later on in the spoiler zone. Thank you, Roz, who says, I don't know how many more dark-haired Targaryens I can mourn this year. Still not over Baelor. Yeah, Baelor Targaryen had dark hair, and he died in Duncan Egg Season 1. And Luke and Jace had dark hair, and they died in House of the Dragon. Rhaenys had dark hair in the books, and Rhaenys died last season. So it seems to be the kiss of death, doesn't it? It's all the dark-haired Targaryens that died. Thank you, Jacqueline, who says, do you think that with Daeron's hair, they might be saying that Daeron is actually Kristen's son, to double down on Alicent's hypocrisy? Yeah, okay. So Alicent Hightower has been having sex with Criston Cole, and in this episode we see someone who might be Prince Daeron Targaryen, but it's unconfirmed. This kid in the green. I mean, his hair is Alicent's hair color, so this could be Alicent's son, Daeron. Unconfirmed. It's an interesting theory that Darren might be Alicent and Kristen's son, but I'm not sure if it fits the timeline. Because I think that Viserys was still alive when Darren was born. I suppose you're theorizing that Alicent had started having sex with Kristen much earlier, which I suppose is possible, but unconfirmed. Yeah, I mean, I don't suppose it's impossible, but it's not something that the show has, done. I think that Alicent and Kristen are hypocritical enough. We know that they have broken the very rules that they have criticized Rhaenyra for. I think they've made that point. And I don't think there's time to do, a big reveal about all of that. But it is a fun theory, and it would be funny if it was true, if both Alicent and Rhaenyra had secret bastard children. Thank you, Cherry, who says, to have one child like that is a mistake. To have 3 is an insult. So Cherry is saying that she sent Daeron away to hide the fact that Darren was Kristen's bastard. And yeah, there is a great irony if Alicent had a dark-haired child, just like Rhaenyra's 3 dark-haired children. You're kind of cooking there. I think that's fun. I like that theory. Maybe he is a bastard. Thank you, Sam K, who says, been watching your stuff for years, got me through a combat deployment. Keep up the good work, brother. Crabs in the chat. Thank you, Sam K. All the best. Thank you, Victoria, who says, keep being okay. Love heart and crabs in the chat. And Jess says, we have gotten the 2 biggest dark-haired Targaryen deaths this year. I think it's funny because, George Martin wants to show that there are dark-haired Targaryens, partly because Jon Snow is a dark-haired Targaryen. That seems to be what he's going to reveal in the books. But he also wants the Targaryens to have their iconic silvery hair most of the time, so he needs to kill off the dark-haired Targaryens so that their dark hair doesn't remain in the main genetic line of House Targaryen. That guy sure is tying himself in knots. All right. So once again, if you want to listen to 70 hours of exclusive bonus content, if you want to hear our coverage of the Mad King play in just a few weeks, go and sign up at nebula.tv/AltShiftX or nebula.tv/AltShiftX. Using our links, you can get 50% off an annual subscription. It's a good way to support this channel. And you can watch the fake Jon Snow, a gloriously deranged 22-hour-long video. You can also listen to Dragon Time right after each episode of House of the Dragon comes out. You can also listen on podcast apps using the Nebula podcast feed. So it's a good way to support these channels, and I'd appreciate it if you sign up to Nebula. Okay, let's enter the spoiler zone, shall we? Let's enter the spoiler zone. Alright, spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. So let's talk a bit more about Nettles. So Nettles in the books is the character who claims Sheepstealer. And Nettles has a strange relationship with Daemon Targaryen. It seems like they're friends. It seems like Daemon might be Nettles' father. The book also suggests that they might also be lovers. More incest, hooray. But they have this curious relationship, and they spend time together in the Riverlands while they're hunting for Aemond and Vhagar. And they spend some time at Maidenpool, is it? And at one point, Rhaenyra orders for Daemon to kill Nettles, because Rhaenyra gets really paranoid. She feels like everyone's betraying her. Mysaria tells her not to trust anyone. So Rhaenyra orders the death of Nettles, and Daemon refuses to disobey, and he lets Nettles go, and there's a sad farewell, and Nettles flies off, and then Nettles becomes a fire witch in the Vale. So, in the main series, there are these people called the Burned Men, and the Burned Men are a clan of weirdos who live in the hills, and they like to ritually burn each other and burn themselves to show their courage. And it seems as though this custom of the Burned Men burning themselves, it started because of Nettles and Sheepstealer living in the Vale. And the Burned Men used to go and make offerings to Nettles and Sheepstealer would occasionally burn them. So it's really, really cool that Nettles and Sheepstealer, they have like a lasting impact on the lore, which is very mysterious and interesting and surprising. But if Nettles is removed from this show, I guess they're not including that. And the other question is, if they're removing Nettles and replacing her with Rayna, will Rayna have a storyline similar to Nettles? I think that it's possible that Rayna will have a similar storyline to Nettles. Maybe Rayna will hang out in the Riverlands with Daemon, because I think it makes sense that now that Rayna has a dragon, Daemon might be a lot more interested in Rayna. They did set up this idea that Daemon ignored Rayna because Rayna didn't have a dragon. And I think that part of what Season 2 was about was there was a bit where the ghost of Laena appeared to Daemon and said, "Have you been looking after our girls?" And we've seen that Daemon has not been looking after Rayna and Baelor well enough. He's not been a good father to them. And so I wonder if Season 3 will confront that, and maybe Daemon will go to Rayna and will try to teach her how to be a better dragon rider. I think that's something that they've been setting up, and it makes a lot of sense. The question is, will they go so far as to have Rhaenyra order the death of Rayna? That would be dramatic. And they could be going that way, because like maybe Rhaenyra will blame Rayna for the death of Jace. So maybe Rayna won't even like stay with Rhaenyra this season. Maybe Rayna will flee. Maybe she'll fly back to the Vale because Rhaenyra might blame her, and because Rayna can't control where Sheepstealer flies. And so maybe Daemon will go to her and they'll spend time together, and, you know, maybe this will drive a wedge between Daemon and Rhaenyra if Rhaenyra hates Rayna. I think that might be where they're going. And I think it could be interesting, but I think that I don't see how that fits with Daemon's storyline in Season 2. Because in Season 2, that was all about Daemon ultimately affirming his loyalty to Rhaenyra. Like, they spent a lot of time in Season 2 of Daemon questioning his motivations, deciding he doesn't want the throne for himself, and deciding that Rhaenyra is the chosen one. And I think it would be very weird. It would undo all of that progress if Daemon abandons Rhaenyra this season. And yet that is kind of what happens in the books. It seems that way. So it's all very mysterious to me. I'm very curious to see what they do with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is like the biggest question mark for me in the show right now. But yeah, it's very curious indeed. So Tash in the live chat says that my Nettles theory is that Rhaenyra will get nicknamed Nettles. And that seems to be the kind of BS the writers would pull. Yeah, well, I don't think it would mean anything to anyone if Rhaenyra was named Nettles. I think that would just annoy the book readers, who are the only people who knows who Nettles is. So, yeah, I don't know. Hale Mendoza says, I'm still new to Game of Thrones lore, but what the heck was that Wendigo in the middle of the eps? Yeah, I think the goat and the green man, well, green men are a thing in the lore. They date back to the Pact, when the Children of the Forest made peace with the humans. And I think that the green men are probably hybrids, like half Child of the Forest, half human. But in any case, they are guardians of the Isle of Faces. They are like the sacred priests of the religion of the old gods, it seems. They're very, very mysterious, and we don't know exactly what they want. But there is a bit in the books that mentions Adam meeting a green man. And Howland Reed supposedly met a green man. And it seems that Alice Rivers is connected to the green man. Alice Rivers seems to be connected to the magic of the old gods and the trees and nature. And so she seems to be able to control the goat, Del. And it seems to me that Alice is sort of working for the old gods and the green man. And it's a mystery what they want. Valar says, thoughts on Alice Rivers' motives. Is it prophetic eugenics? Yeah, well, a lot of people who have visions and prophecies in this world seem to think that a particular hero, a particular bloodline must get the throne, must get dragons. And it seems like that prophetic magical bloodline leads to Daenerys and Jon Snow. And it seems like Daenerys and Jon Snow might be the people who save the world in the end. But I think that the books are also interested in questioning the idea of the Chosen One, questioning prophecy. So I think that something weird and ironic and complex will happen in the end. I don't think it'll be Arya saving the day in the end, like in the TV show, but I do think it'll be something subversive. We've got some thoughts about that in our video, The Real Jon Snow, if you're curious. So yeah, I think it might make sense if Alice is like trying to manipulate things to go a certain way. Like, maybe Alice Rivers, spoilers, wants Aegon and Viserys, Rhaenyra and Daemon's children, to get the throne, which is what happens in the books in the end. Because maybe Alice knows that that's destiny. But I also feel like it's kind of boring if every mystical character are all just like trying to lead to this predetermined outcome. I mean, that does seem kind of a bit like what Bloodraven is doing, but I think that, we also we got to ground this story in human relationships. So I think the question for me is, like, a more interesting question is, like, what will Alice's relationship be with Aemond? Because with Daemon, Alice was saying, stop doing war crimes. Alice was saying, don't do all this horrible business to the Brackens. It's evil. Don't do it. And so Alice seems to be interested in protecting the common people. But in the books, spoilers, Alice becomes a lover of Aemond. And Aemond is a war criminal who spends most of the rest of his life killing civilians and burning villages in the Riverlands. So, like, why would Alice be having this relationship with this evil, evil man? I think that maybe Alice might try to convince Aemond to stop being such a monster. Or maybe Alice is deliberately trying to get Aemond and Daemon killed. Because, spoilers, Aemond and Daemon kill each other in the God's Eye. So maybe that is Alice's ultimate goal. Maybe Alice is trying to get Daemon and Aemond killed because they are both brutal, evil, murderous men with dangerous dragons. I mean, that might be as much of a goal as we need. And I would love to see the old gods symbolically defeating the dragons when the dragons are swallowed into the God's Eye, the symbol of old God's power by the Isle of Faces. I think that could be a really cool, like, mystical, magical end that also hopefully has some, like, emotional impact for Alice, who is running this psychotherapy clinic for angry, incestuous young men. Thank you, Cherry, who says, how do we feel about Alice helping Rhaenyra by informing the Dragon Seeds about the gullet? Yeah, well, did that help Rhaenyra? Because Alice only told Ulf, Adam, and Hugh about the battle when it was already too late. Like, Ulf, Adam, and Hugh didn't get to the gullet in time, so Rhaenyra wasn't helped. And in fact, it may be Aemond who is helped, because when Aemond does come to Harrenhal, Adam, Ulf, and Hugh have left. So Alice might not actually be helping Rhaenyra at all. It might be that her goal is getting Aemond to Harrenhal and messing with his head. The Jackstraw asks about Aegon and Viserys. So yeah, Aegon and Viserys are the young sons of Daemon and Rhaenyra. And yeah, spoilers in the books, Aegon and Viserys both become kings after Aegon and Rhaenyra are dead. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there were hopes that maybe House of the Dragon could continue into season 5, 6, 7, and to tell the story of Aegon's regency, because in the Fire and Blood book there is a whole story about the next king, Aegon III, and what his reign was like. I think that, that would be a very sad, weird, quiet show, and I'm not sure. I feel like maybe they're not going to do that. I feel like they're not going to make that show. Maybe they could. I hope they do. But I don't know if they will do that. It doesn't feel like they're planning that right now. And showrunner Ryan Condal did recently say that season 4 is the end of House of the Dragon, for him at least. So I don't think they're planning a Aegon III regency story right now. Jess K says that Alan's convos with Corlys are pretty unfortunate, considering Alan's future with Elena. We won't get into Elena and all that right now. We will fix the Streamlabs link, and Valantred says, why is the only religion without power the Seven? I think that, the faith of the Seven is like the new civilized religion. It's like the Catholic Church. I think that there's something to be said with like modernity being less magic. It's like what Tolkien was writing about. There used to be magic in the world, but then we invented the Industrial Revolution and monotheism, and then we lost the magic, and now we're all materialistic. Like, I think that there's a similar vibe going on in Westeros. The old gods are the real primal power of magic and blood and nature, but it's being replaced with this institutional religion, which is simply not as magical anymore. It's more of a human power and a civilizational power. I think that's kind of what they're doing. But hey, some people theorize that Davos Seaworth was resurrected by the mother, so who knows? All right, we've been speaking for 3 hours. I think it's time to wrap this up. It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, we are not making scripted, edited, explained videos this season. For 10 years, we were making explained videos about every episode of every Game of Thrones show. This season, we are not doing it, largely because we are going to cover the Mad King play, put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company in July. So we're trying something a little different after 10 years. But we're still doing these live streams, and there is still Dragon Time, which is out now on Nebula, and it's going to be a fun time. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited that the dragons are back. This is the first time that there's ever been 2 Game of Thrones seasons in 1 year, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms and House of the Dragon Season 3. So it's a big year, it's a busy year. We're also going to be making some Dune videos. I really want to finish some Dune videos before the 3rd Denis Villeneuve Dune movie comes out, and we have many plans beyond that. So thank you all for joining. I hope I'll see you all next week. You can listen to these live streams on the Alt-Shift-X podcast feed if you would like. I've been rearranging the podcast feed a bit, so the podcast feed also includes most of our big videos, so you can listen to the real Jon Snow and the real Dune, and a lot of those videos are now available as audio on the Alt-Shift-X podcast feed for free, ad-free. You can listen on podcast apps like Pocket Cast and Podcast Addict, as well as Spotify. Link in the description. And yeah, it's also great if you sign up to Nebula. That helps us out. Valar Martinez says, cheers. Cheers to you too. All right, see you all next week. See you next time. Peace.